The long-lost sister who had been missing for 20 years has returned home. But her brothers are going crazy one by one. They can't accept that the sister they've been living with all this time is an imposter. However, Parian, the real sister, feels no ripple in her heart about this. Because in her mind, these people are the culprits who made her fall into hell. The Xi ducal family is the most prominent family in the Eastern Empire. This seemingly flawless noble family actually has a hidden secret. More than a decade ago, the Duke, suspecting the little maid's background, personally drove her out. But later, the Duke regretted it. He used all his power to search for the maid's whereabouts. However, in the end, all results pointed to the little maid's death. 10 years after that, a girl suddenly came to the Duke's family, claiming that she was the Xi maid who had been abandoned as a child. Despite numerous doubts, everyone in the Xi ducal family accepted her and apologized for the mistakes they had made in the past. Afterwards, the fake maid started living a luxurious life, taking advantage of her status. On the other hand, she was also generous to those around her, becoming an object of envy for everyone. But soon, the maid's lies were exposed, and the instigator was a spy sent by the Lo's kingdom, who was also Parian, the true daughter of Duke Xi. More than 20 years ago, the harmonious Xi ducal family welcomed their third child. For the ducal family that already had 2 boys, the arrival of the maid was good news for everyone. But there were no sounds of celebration within the Duke's mansion, because the maid's hair was neither the Duke's colorful black nor the Duchess's brilliant gold, but an ordinary brown. As the guardians of the Eastern Empire, the Xi ducal family inherited dragon blood. Within the family, there are 2 elements that symbolize their special bloodline. The first is sharp energy. From birth, the Xi people could freely control sharp energy. The second is hair color. All direct blood relatives of the Xi family must have hair that seems to be dyed by the night sky. But the little maid had brown hair. All evidence pointed to the conclusion that the Duchess had an affair. However, the Duke's next move surprised everyone. He not only publicly declared that the maid was his daughter, but also believed his wife, who remained righteous even after giving birth to a brown-haired child. This attitude of valuing his wife and daughter as much as his life silenced the retainers who wanted to investigate the Duchess. And so, the little maid grew up under the love of her family. However, one day, the Duchess and the little maid were attacked while returning to their hometown. To investigate the truth, the Eastern and Western empires conducted a joint search, but still found nothing. The only fortunate thing was that the little maid miraculously survived the attack. When the Duke saw that the little maid was unharmed, he immediately understood that his wife had willingly died to protect their daughter. But the little maid, who was only 3 years old at the time, didn't understand the Duke's feelings. Moreover, with the Duke's household in chaos, no one was taking care of the little maid. The young girl could only sit alone in the courtyard, missing her mother. And at that moment, the little maid discovered for the first time that she had the ability to control Earth. But this magic, completely opposite to sharp energy, became the decisive factor in her being driven out. But the little maid didn't know. She used her ability to make a doll that looked very much like her mother. Then, eager to show it to the Duke who also missed her mother, she rushed to him. Unfortunately, at that time, there happened to be a man claiming to be her biological father. The fact that the maid could use magic was thus exposed. To cover up the family's shame, the Duke immediately handed the girl over to that man. After that, the little maid's hellish life began, lasting for years. She was locked up in a tower dedicated to researching magical creatures. At first, the little maid thought she had done something wrong. She thought her father was angry because she had made her beautiful mother look too ugly. To regain her father's love, the little maid made countless dolls of her family members, but still couldn't escape this painful life. Finally, one day someone broke in, but it was neither her father nor her brother who appeared before her eyes. It was Emperor Moma of the Holy Kingdom of Los. That was her first meeting with His Majesty. To this day, the girl still clearly remembers that moment. It was the first time she felt someone else's helping hand. From that moment on, the girl was determined to live for His Majesty. Later, Mamang, who knew the girl's identity, trained her to be a spy and ordered her to infiltrate the Xi ducal family, expose the fake maid's true identity, and sabotage his marriage alliance with the Western Empire. At this time, Priyan was still struggling with how to properly infiltrate the Xi ducal mansion. Disrupting the marriage alliance between the Eastern and Western empires was of utmost importance, because the Holy Kingdom sandwiched between the two great empires, was in a very awkward position. Perian pondered while eating an egg pancake. Suddenly, she stumbled and fell to the ground. The egg pancake had been drugged. Then, several people blindfolded her and put her in a carriage. But in fact, the girl hadn't fainted at all. Her magic could filter out toxins in her body. No poison had any effect on her. However, to be safe, the girl still pretended to be unconscious. When the blindfold was removed, the person she saw made the girl's eyes widen instantly. It was the former Duke of the Xei family, the very culprit who had caused her to fall into hell. Even though he had given up the title of Duke, Father Blue was still the most influential figure in the empire. He was a martial arts expert, a monster who could maintain a youthful appearance. But why would such a person kidnap her? Could it be that he had sensed her intention to infiltrate the ducal mansion and stop the fake maid's marriage? As the girl was pondering, Leeser spoke first. He swore on the family's honor that he had no intention of harming the girl. Then he recited the girl's current identity information. He had done research in advance for this moment. This made Perian even more confused about the purpose of his personal visit to the Holy Kingdom. Next, the girl heard a ridiculous answer. The man had come to the Holy Kingdom specifically to find a maid for his precious daughter. On one hand, it was to avoid suspicion and calculations from others. On the other hand, the girl's appearance was extremely similar to his daughter's. Leeser hoped that Perian could act as his daughter's shadow substitute. As the name suggests, it's when the shadow substitute dies in place of the real person when in danger. Perian was dumbfounded after hearing this. This foolish Duke actually planned to make his real daughter a substitute for the fake one. However, she quickly began to consider this plan. Perhaps this was the best way for her to infiltrate the Duke's mansion. Thinking about this, the girl felt increasingly sorry for her past self. In despair, she had eagerly awaited meeting her father. But in the end, he couldn't even recognize her. Perian took a deep breath. This was indeed a tempting job, but do I have the right to choose? Hearing this, Leeser revealed a sinister smile. He needed a girl who would willingly work as a maid. Forced arrangements would be difficult to be effective at crucial moments. If the young lady refuses my proposal, then drink this cup of tea and end our conversation. It contains some antipsychotic drugs that will make you lose the last 5 hours of memory. Of course, this is just for confidentiality. There's no danger. The girl didn't believe this explanation, of course. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone to the trouble of kidnapping her. To protect his current daughter, the Duke naturally couldn't let today's conversation leak out. But they went to great lengths to use this method, intending to bring it up again after she lost her memory, until she voluntarily agreed. Realizing this, the girl smiled slightly. For the Duke to personally negotiate such a matter, he must love his daughter very much. Hearing this, the Duke's eyes suddenly turned cold. My love for her is beyond words. For her sake, I'd become a scoundrel if necessary. Later, the girl successfully volunteered to accept the proposal. Just as she was about to leave to pack her belongings, a blond man angrily approached her. The girl was the real maid, but the Duke had abandoned her with his own hands when she was young, and 10 years later, mistakenly treated an impostor as his own daughter, caring for her attentively. During this time, the little maid endured great suffering. Eventually, she was rescued by the Holy Kingdom's emperor and trained as a spy. Now, the girl's mission was to go to the Xei ducal mansion, expose the fake maid's identity, and sabotage her marriage alliance with the Western Empire. Unexpectedly, the girl's biological father suddenly kidnapped her and entrusted her to be his daughter's shadow substitute. As the girl was packing her belongings, preparing to go to the Xei ducal mansion, a blond man angrily approached her. The man's name was Mello, the only heir of the Holy Kingdom. He was also the brother who grew up with the girl, closer than a real brother. The girl understood Mello's concern for her. After all, he had always wanted to avoid any connection with Xei, but now she had accepted this mission. Seeing Mello's expression, the girl chuckled. Are you worried about me? At first, her relationship with Mello wasn't good. When she first came to the Holy Kingdom, Mello strongly opposed her staying here. Because the Holy Kingdom was surrounded by the Eastern and Western empires, it was difficult to maintain sovereignty. If discovered in that situation, Xei's made being secretly taken away by the Holy Kingdom would surely become a reason for the Empire to declare war on the Holy Kingdom. Although Mello only intended to scare the girl, for the naive little maid at the time, it was a huge shock. The thought of bringing disaster to her benefactor's country frightened the little maid so much she had difficulty breathing. In the end, she even fainted. When she hazily woke up, she heard His Majesty Ma Mong scolding Mello. After Mello left, the little maid nervously got up from the bed. "Why did you bring me back? If my existence will cause trouble for your majesty, you might as well send me back to the tower." Tears of grievance and anxiety poured from her eyes. Seeing this, Mamong sighed. "You indeed can't continue living under your real name, but your life won't become false because of it. In this world, there are professions that require pretending to be someone else, and professions that protect the country from the shadows. Our holy kingdom relies on the strength of these people to function. If so, can I also help your majesty?" Mamong chuckled upon hearing this. "Did I bring you back to gain your help? I simply couldn't bear to ignore a child suffering abuse. Saving you was my own choice, so you have no responsibility at all. You don't need to worry about anything, just focus on growing up strong." The next day, Mello found the girl to apologize. But the girl beat him to it, asking what kind of people protect the country from the shadows. Mello was momentarily confused. Perhaps she means people in the intelligence department. From that moment, the girl's life had a purpose. Even if she had to live under a false identity in the future, she wanted to help the emperor who had given her a new life. Seeing the girl constantly talking about the Holy Kingdom's interests, Mello knew he couldn't dissuade her no matter what. But she was going to meet her former family after all. No matter how indifferent she pretended to be now, her heart couldn't possibly be unwavering. However, perhaps this was also the time for him to bring closure personally. So Mello called out to the girl. He had an additional order. For this mission, she must ensure the Xei ducal family loses face completely. The girl thought Mello must trust her to give this additional order. After all, he was the Holy Kingdom's most capable spy. When Leeser realizes the daughter he found after years and cherished is an imposter, this way, he would surely find it difficult to think of finding his daughter again. A few days later, the girl boarded a train heading to the Eastern Empire. She was full of confidence for this mission. Her earth magic was perfect for espionage work. Back when she was still in the tower, the girl could draw nutrients from the soil. And due to loneliness and self-blame, she kept making many soil dolls. In the end, she even made lifelike dolls with skin-like texture. Besides this, the girl had awakened another ability. Because the girl desperately longed for life outside the tower, she made some mud balls and threw them out. As a result, she discovered that her hearing and vision could connect with the soil. Later, the girl made a doll identical to herself, which could help share her pain. When feeling upset, the girl would hide in the doll's body. When curious, she would send soil out to gaze at the sky. When lonely, she would be with the family members made of soil. At this moment, the train had arrived at the station. The girl returned once again to the familiar, yet strange ducal mansion deep in her memories. The mansion's maid quickly came out to greet her. The girl also felt like resting a bit. It wasn't that the journey was tiring. On the contrary, she had received thorough hospitality from Leeser. But because of her appearance identical to the maid's, she couldn't avoid people's whispered discussions. Then the girl arrived at the meeting room. A well-dressed noble lady walked in. This person was named Lucian, the second daughter of the Isbel family, chosen from birth to be the maid's attendant. The girl thought, if she had grown up in the ducal mansion, Lucian might have been her friend. At this moment, Lucian suddenly reminded the girl, "Miss, you must be especially mindful of your behavior in front of young Master Lyrian." The maid should be with young Master Lyrian now. That was the girl's former older brother, but she found it a bit strange. This was the Xei family, where even forms of address needed attention. Why would Lyrian be entering and leaving his sister's room at this time? The girl told herself not to overthink and to prepare mentally. In the 4 years of searching for the maid in the Xei ducal family, countless young ladies' dreams of becoming the maid overnight were shattered, but this fake maid passed the investigation and even lived in the ducal mansion for a full year. This wasn't something that could be achieved simply by being clever. At least the fake maid herself was not to be underestimated. However, at the moment of seeing the harmless, smiling maid, the girl realized it was different from what she had imagined. Not only that, but her brother Lyrian was actually constantly by the maid's side. No matter how much he loved his sister, why would he be drying her hair? The maid should have dedicated servants to attend to her. Thinking about her absence, these two being alone together, the girl felt a sense of unease. This was hardly different from dating. The real maid who had been missing for 20 years had come home. But what the girl didn't expect was that the imposter who had assumed her identity was openly engaging in incest with her biological brother. Not long ago, the girl had just arrived at the ducal mansion to start work. Who knew the fake maid had been flirting with her brother all along, while the brother didn't even glance at his own sister. Finally, the fake maid turned her gaze to the girl. "What is your name?" The girl respectfully said the fake name prepared for her by His Majesty. Perry. Hearing this, the fake maid burst out laughing. "This name is too similar to mine. I'll give you a new name instead. Since your hair is brown, let's just call you Braun." Although speechless inside, the girl still agreed. She was about to ask about her future work when the fake maid suddenly interrupted. She ordered her to leave. The girl thought the other didn't understand her purpose for coming as an attendant. But the fake maid said she knew all along. She just didn't need it. First, there wouldn't be any danger around her at all. Even if there was danger, her brother and the knights were here. As for her father's side, I'll explain it clearly. You don't need to worry. If that's the case, there shouldn't be anything else, right? Then please leave. After the girl left the room, the fake maid recalled the girl's face and gradually lost her smile. The reason she could impersonate the maid was because she had brown hair identical to the maid's and purple eyes that shone like jewels. But to obtain these, she had already paid a huge price. Therefore, she absolutely wouldn't allow another woman who resembled the maid to appear here. Then, the fake maid put on that pitiful expression again and asked Lyrian, "Does that person look like me?" Hearing Lyrian say they indeed looked alike, the fake maid pretended to be hurt and pouted. Seeing this, Lyrian hurriedly said he wouldn't let that attendant near her, or simply ruin her appearance. Only then did the fake maid smile. But she's the stand-in father found. However, hearing brother say this, I feel relieved. Lyrian stroked the fake maid's hair, telling her not to overthink. That attendant was just a stand-in. The fake maid's anxious heart had just calmed down. Then, Lyrian's next words made her expression change again. "Can you still use that magic you used when you were little?" After a moment's hesitation, the fake maid made an excuse, saying she had forgotten because of the trauma. "Brother, why are you asking about this now?" Seeing his sister angry, Lyrian immediately apologized. The sudden inquiry made the fake maid nervous again. She couldn't use magic at all, nor could she imitate it. But she quickly persuaded herself to stay calm. After all, no one would doubt her identity as the maid now. Even Lyrian had to apologize obediently at her whim. Little did she know that behind her, Lyrian's face darkened ominously. Meanwhile, the girl returned to her own room. Actually, she had anticipated that the other would try to put her in her place. The fake maid deliberately not assigning her work and intentionally acting coy with Lyrian. These actions were undoubtedly flaunting her status. Having occupied the maid's position with just a face, the other certainly wouldn't be comfortable with a maid who looked very similar to her in the house. Seen this way, the fake maid wasn't as cheerful as she appeared on the surface. However, the girl didn't mind. With her abilities, there was no information she couldn't investigate. Whether it was the soil on shoe soles or in flower pots, she could influence any soil. This way, the fake maid's attempt to restrict her actions actually gave the girl ample time to investigate. At night, a white-haired man came to the tower where the girl was once imprisoned. His name was Pandalnian, the adopted son of Duke Xi. He was also the current generation's Duke of the Xi family. However, his attitude towards the maid was completely opposite to that of the other direct family members. When he first met the fake maid, Pandalnian showed extreme disgust, even accusing Perian maid's appearance of being nauseating. This statement immediately caused Lyrian's displeasure, and the atmosphere in the Duke's mansion began to become tense. However, for Pandalnian, Perian maid was actually a very special existence, because Duke Xi adopted her with the purpose of making her the maid's husband. At that time, Duke Xi, in order to bring home the maid who wasn't of Xi bloodline, thought of adopting a son and then making the maid his daughter-in-law. Finally, after rounds of competition, Pandalnian was chosen by the Duke. At that time, he ran desperately towards the tower to escape. He wanted to see this maid whom everyone in the Xi family missed, the only existence that could take him out of hell. He thought that as long as he was chosen by the maid, all his efforts would have been worth it. However, he witnessed the maid's death with his own eyes. Therefore, Pandalnian was very certain that the maid in the family was an imposter. A year after the fake maid came to the Duke's mansion, although the family seemed harmonious on the surface, all the direct bloodlines began to behave strangely. The former Duke Lesser, who held power and commanded the world, after hearing the fake maid say she was afraid of him, hurriedly left the Duke's mansion and announced his retirement. The eldest son Lyrian, who followed authority and discipline, began breaking rules to get the maid's coquettish behavior. The second son, Pinox, who had a noble character, started drinking himself into oblivion every day after the maid appeared. Now Pandemonium returned to this tower that once imprisoned the real maid. At this moment, he noticed that the bottom of the iron door was covered with scratches made by fingernails. The real Parian must have been here, crying in despair. I wanted to do something for the maid, but thinking of the current absurd and bizarre Duke's mansion, he felt relieved. Even if she returned home, the maid wouldn't find happiness. Since witnessing the maid's death, Pandemonium had been like a doll, without an owner, losing the meaning to live on. But he still occasionally fantasized, if the maid were still alive, would everything be better than now? He personally abandoned his daughter, but soon regretted it. He used all his power to search for his daughter's whereabouts, but in the end only received news of the little maid's death. 10 years later, a girl came to the XEI Duke's mansion. Everyone regarded her as the missing little maid. To protect his long-lost daughter, the Blue Duke traveled far to the Holy Kingdom to find a shadow stand-in. However, he didn't know this shadow stand-in, who was treated as a sacrifice, was actually the daughter he had abandoned years ago. Now the girl returned to the Duke's mansion where she once lived, in the role of a maid. Because the fake maid rejected her, everyone in the mansion intentionally ignored the girl. But the girl's exemplary attitude of not refusing troublesome work still earned her the approval of other servants in the mansion. Just when the girl felt everything was developing in a good direction, a group of rogue knights set their sights on her. Seeing the exclusive maid doing these menial tasks, they concluded that the girl wasn't favored by the maid. A few of them casually expressed their intention to easily win over the girl. Little did they know that their conspiracy was heard word for word by the girl. A green-haired man stepped forward and greeted the girl. He voluntarily offered to share her workload. The girl didn't expose his hypocritical mask, casually responding to the green-haired man's chat. After the green-haired man finished the work, he invited the girl to find time to have a drink together and chat. Knowing the man's true intentions, the girl immediately refused. Hearing this, the green-haired man instantly lost patience. "Mere maid dares to refuse my invitation? You don't think you're some noble lady, do you?" The girl just calmly stared at him. She didn't expect to expose his true nature so easily. At this moment, 2 other knights also walked over. From their jovial attitude, it was clear that these people didn't take the girl seriously. But even if she could only do menial tasks now, she was still nominally the maid's exclusive servant. These people daring to lay hands on her could only be described as fools rushing in where angels fear to tread. Suddenly, the arrogance on the green-haired man's face turned to terror. "Lord Pinox, why are you here?" Hearing this, the girl's whole body trembled. She quickly turned her head to look. That gloomy and decadent aura was undoubtedly Pinox. She hadn't noticed his presence at all. Not just the sound, she hadn't even detected the strong smell of alcohol. While the girl was in a daze, Pinox ordered the knights to leave. From his voice, the girl couldn't tell if he was drunk or sober. She hadn't expected to meet her second brother here either. The girl thanked Pinox for what just happened, but he seemed not to hear, staring intently at her. "You look very much like my sister." The girl thought he meant she looked like the fake maid, so she agreed. "People often say that." "Yes, but do you need anything from me?" After the girl finished speaking, Pinox sat down on the spot. "All right, you can go back to your work." Although his behavior was very puzzling, the girl didn't think much of it. What she didn't know was that Pinox kept watching her retreating figure, as if trying to remember someone distant through her appearance. After that, the girl often saw Pinox's figure while she was working. At first, she thought it was a coincidence, but recently, his behavior became so blatant that the girl wanted to curse. If it were anyone else, the girl wouldn't care so much. Because although the girl had been doing chores like a maid, secretly, she had collected a lot of intelligence using mud dolls. Everything the mud dolls saw would be conveyed to the girl. Not only that, they would also report to the girl things they thought were important. From other maids gossiping about her behind her back, to witnessing mosquitoes mating in the air. But the mud dolls were after all created by magic and could easily be discovered by powerful people like Pinox. So being followed by such a person would limit the girl's abilities. This day, the girl finally couldn't bear it anymore and decided to confront Pinox. Pinox carefully sat down next to the girl. Mr. Peanox, you're following me because I look like your sister, right? If that's the case, why don't you go see the maid directly? What's wrong with seeing your sister? Hearing this, Peanox immediately felt a surge of anger. Anyone with a conscience wouldn't even look at that woman, would they? Everyone in the family is crazy. The father abandoned his daughter with his own hands, yet took in an impostor of unknown origin as his own daughter and cared for her attentively. Since the fake maid came to the Duke's mansion, everything in the XEI family had changed. The Duke gave up his title and announced his retirement. The eldest brother showed feelings beyond sibling love for the fake maid, and the second brother drank daily to drown his sorrows, missing his sister. The girl couldn't help but feel confused. If he wanted to see his sister, why not go find the maid personally? To this, Peanox only said that anyone with a conscience wouldn't go see her. After that, Peanox didn't answer any more of the girl's questions. Ending the conversation, the girl returned to the mansion. Suddenly, a girl approached her. The girl hadn't expected to be welcomed by someone else. Seeing the other's pink hair and pupils, the girl guessed it was Albury based on her investigation. In this Eastern Empire where women could only be maids, Albury not only became the maid's attendant through her swordsmanship, but also climbed to the position of deputy officer in the Night Order. Usually, maids were chosen from other families, like Lucian, but there were special cases based entirely on ability, and Albury was one of them. However, what business could such an excellent person have with her? Are you Miss Albury? Hearing that the girl knew her, Albury excitedly chattered nonstop, praising the girl's good skin one moment, then saying they should use informal speech since they're both maids the next. Finally, she invited the girl to go out and play with her today. The girl hadn't expected it to be such a small matter. She had thought the other person was the maid who would reject her. The girl agreed without hesitation, while also wanted to see what tricks the other might be up to. Along the way, the girl chatted a lot with Albury. From the conversation, she found that this child was even more innocent than imagined. The girl thought perhaps it was because Albury liked the maid, and she happened to look similar to the maid. But from the investigation on Albury, she shouldn't have had goodwill towards the maid, because it was the maid who caused her to get such a sinecure position. After spending some time with Albury, the girl didn't find that she was hiding anything, so she let go of her suspicions towards Albury. After all, she would leave the Duke's mansion once the mission was completed. As long as Albury didn't interfere with her, it was fine. One day, while dining with Albury, because Albury was worried that the girl would exhaust herself doing so much heavy work every day, she proudly talked about her heroic deeds at the Knight Academy in the past. Although most of the resume was fabricated, she still told the other her real experiences. The little maid in this life was destined to live wearing someone else's mask. She had countless identities before. Later, perhaps His Majesty felt sorry for her and required the girl to use her own face and the name Perry at the academy. It was also because of this that she was discovered by her father and brought to be a maid. At this time, Albury suggested that the girl should learn swordsmanship from Peanox. After all, she had taken night courses before, and getting guidance from Peanox would enrich her experience. At the mention of Peanox, the girl didn't know what to say. Anyway, as long as he's around, I feel very pressured. As soon as she finished speaking, the girl saw Peanox appear in front of her. Afterwards, Peanox explained to the girl over and over again that he just happened to have business with Albury that day. The girl was speechless at his shameless attitude. Normally, anyone with a bit of self-respect should stay far away from her. But Peanox was even more blatant than before. It made other servants in the mansion look panicked every time they saw him. Although this wasn't the girl's fault, she still requested to be assigned work in a place with no one around next time. With fewer startled exclamations, the girl felt much more relaxed. And during her work, Peanox, looking at the girl's back, mumbled to himself about Perry's childhood. The content was mostly similar, all about how cute and obedient Perry was as a child. Even if he took away Perry's ice cream, next time, she would still share her snacks with him. The girl felt a bit surprised in her heart. The second brother actually remembered so much about her childhood. But at this point, all of this no longer mattered. After finishing work, the girl collapsed on the bed. She now had a general understanding of the Duke's mansion. Now it was time to think about how to expose the imposter. The simplest method, of course, was to directly demonstrate her earth magic. But after that, she wouldn't be able to easily return to the Holy Kingdom. Moreover, the person she had to deal with wasn't just the fake maid alone. there were also forces hiding in the shadows helping her. The girl decided to use her magic, taking advantage of the mud dolls to observe the maid's room. However, the scene before her eyes made the girl shudder. The fake maid was constantly poking her own eyeballs with her hand, even drawing blood. Looking closely, there was an open cosmetic on the dressing table. Despite being in so much pain, she still persisted in applying it. It must be something indispensable for imitating the maid. The girl immediately guessed that it was a tool to change the color of the pupils. In this world, purple pupils were not easily inherited. Only women who had reached a certain level in swordsmanship or magic had a chance of giving birth to children with purple pupils. Thinking of this, the girl had an idea. She just needed to let everyone know that the maid's eye color was fake. If lucky, she could also expose the mastermind providing the fake maid with the tools. This was truly killing two birds with one stone. However, the next day, the girl was again pestered by Peanox. This time he started boasting that when Perry was little, she always liked to suck his fingers. He even deliberately applied very bitter juice to tease her. But surprisingly, he found that Perry could handle bitter tastes well. The girl put down her work after hearing this. Do you like Perry the maid that much? If you like her so much that you have to brag to me every day, why don't you just go find the maid directly? Peanox fell silent for a moment upon hearing this. Then, with a gloomy face, he complained to the girl about how hypocritical his father and older brother were. They were the ones who abandoned her first, but now they're pretending to be close. Hearing these words, the girl suddenly remembered that everything Peanox had told her was about things before he was driven away. Even now, when the fake maid was deeply loved by the entire continent, he never boasted about it once. But he probably didn't know the maid was a fake. Otherwise, with his temper, he would have taught her a lesson long ago. It's just that Peanox's memories were stuck in that time when the family was harmonious. He had buried the pain of the middle period and pretended to live normally until now. If she exposed the maid's identity now, Peanox might break down because of it. As the girl was deep in thought, Peanox suddenly asked for her name. Although exasperated that he only asked now, the girl still told him the name Braun. This way, perhaps, he would no longer treat her as a substitute for his sister. Just as the girl was about to get up and leave, Peanox called out to her again. If you were Perry, what would you do? Your family abandoned you with their own hands, yet they still live a life of luxury. The girl was about to speak when a man suddenly appeared, interrupting the two. He was Herrick, the captain of the Sapphire Knights. Duke Lyrian invites both of you to dinner together. At the banquet, Lyrian started by apologizing to the girl for his brother's stalking behavior today. Although the girl accepted the apology, she remained cautious inside. Lyrian had clearly been ignoring her that day, so why did he suddenly invite her to dinner? Even the fake maid wasn't there. Could it really just be about Peanox's matter? However, the relationship between these brothers seemed surprisingly good. Recalling Peanox's words at that time, the girl smiled self-mockingly. No matter what, they were still family after all. Meanwhile, the fake maid heard about Lyrian inviting the girl to dinner. She couldn't believe that her brother hadn't brought her along. And even Peanox, she heard, had been drinking less lately. Was her presence not enough for both of them? Although the maid said it was fine and forced a smile, in reality, she had already developed murderous intentions towards this attendant who looked just like her. Because the girl had dinner with her brothers, the fake maid was so jealous she was going mad. Without a word, she beat the girl. However, the girl didn't feel angry, because she had already found a way to deal with the fake maid. Right now, the fake maid who had just learned about this was shocked. How could her brothers deliberately avoid her? But soon she persuaded herself to calm down and focus on playing the role of the maid well. There were more urgent matters than Braun. Her fiancé, Houghton, was about to arrive at the Duke's mansion. Even the fake maid didn't expect this marriage to happen. The Wyndham family was a prestigious family on par with Xai in the Western Empire. And Houghton was the man who inherited the Wyndham family. 6 years ago, the relationship between the two families was so bad that war could break out at any time. This situation, which should have been impossible to reconcile, was broken by the arrival of the fake maid. This led the fake maid to become conceited, thinking she was the one who gathered everyone's blessings and reverence. However, now she needed to deal with Braun first, to prevent her from taking the opportunity to make Houghton have other thoughts. Just then, the fake maid's pupils experienced a sharp pain. The pain, like fingernails scratching her eyeballs, made her whole body tremble uncontrollably. Although it was caused by her coveting something that didn't belong to her, the fake maid blamed it all on Braun. It was all her fault that her brothers were distancing themselves. She decided to trample Braun underfoot. Meanwhile, In the dining room, Peanox found Lyrian's attitude towards Braun very curious. It was the first time he had seen his older brother address a maid as Miss. Lyrian explained it was because Braun was Perry's attendant. Hearing this, Peanox was slightly stunned. Seeing his expression, the girl understood he knew nothing about the stand-in. After all, Peanox was righteous. If he knew about this, he would definitely object. At this moment, Peanox had also roughly figured out the situation. Perry must dislike Braun. That's why she deliberately distanced herself from her. If that's the case, Big Brother shouldn't indulge her every whim, but should help mediate behind the scenes. Then Lyrian apologized to the girl, saying he would report truthfully when father returned. The girl awkwardly accepted, thinking, "You treated me like I was invisible before, now you're pretending to care?" Then Lyrian teased Peanox, saying he acted so cold in front of Perry, but was so relaxed around Miss Braun. Peanox also felt ridiculous about himself, clinging to someone who looked very similar to his sister and recounting memories. But he only remembered those happy times. If he were to show affection to Perry now, such behavior would be like deliberately ignoring his painful memories from that period. Lyrian comforted Peanox, saying everything would get better. What they needed to do was to keep loving her. As long as they kept being good to her, those missing things would gradually be compensated. Once they started talking about the maid, the two completely ignored the girl. Their sincere attitude, however, made Braun feel so desolate. Their real sister was right in front of them. In fact, this was the first time the three siblings had reunited. The girl comforted herself during dinner, thinking that he would leave soon anyway. After dinner, the girl returned to her room with relief. The first thing she did was check on the mud doll's condition. Earlier, while everyone was eating, she had secretly sent the mud doll to bring back some of the fake maid's cosmetics. The girl leaned in and sniffed carefully. Unexpectedly, she detected the scent of a magical beast. This byproduct made from magical beast blood and flesh, while granting the user great power, also had the side effect of making people cruel and violent. However, the processing and circulation of such items had long been banned. The people behind the maid must not be simple. Then the girl peeped into the maid's room again. She indeed saw the fake maid suffering from the side effects in unbearable pain. She saw her pick up the communication orb, ordering all maids to bring Braun to her presence. Although she didn't know why the other party was looking for her, the girl decided to play along for now. She slumped in front of the maid, pretending to be bewildered, asking the maid what she had done wrong. However, before she could finish, the fake maid viciously raised her right hand. A slap sent the girl falling to the ground. Even the girl herself hadn't expected this outcome. Slapping her in front of so many maids. Wasn't she afraid of being labeled as brutal and unreasonable? "You dare to covet my position with that face?" The papers the fake maid threw down contained all of the girl's information. "You, an orphan with no parents, almost expelled from school for using violence. You have nothing but a graduation certificate, a mere social parasite. Yet you dare use this face to seduce my brothers. Just because you wander around casually, you've thrown the entire Duke's mansion into chaos." The girl thought to herself, what nonsense is this person spouting? But for now, it was best to apologize obediently. Then, the fake maid said she would give the girl another chance. "From now on, you must come here every day so I can see your face." The girl pretended to be scared and quickly agreed. Seeing her goal achieved, the fake maid put on that kind and gentle face again. Back in her room, the girl still couldn't figure out the fake maid's purpose. Was gathering the maids just to humiliate her? However, just now, Elbieri's expression didn't look good. She wondered if they would still be close to her after being rejected by the maid like this. Just then, there was a knock at the door. As soon as she opened the door, Elbieri rushed in and hugged the girl. And not just her, even Lucian came. Lucian brought ointment to treat the girl. This behavior worried the girl. They both knew the maid disliked her, yet they came to treat her wounds. Was this really okay? After exchanging glances, Lucian explained, "Actually, the maid goes crazy about once a month, but she's usually very kind to us. Perhaps she had such a painful childhood that this is the only way she can vent her suppressed hatred." The girl thought to herself that the fake maid's character was well established. This was merely a side effect caused by the magical beast power. No matter how we try to explain, Miss Braun, who suffered the insult, must feel very wronged. But I still want to apologize to you. As the maid's servant, I'm ashamed that I couldn't correct the maid's mistake. I know this can't be resolved with just an apology. I also know it's shameful to ask for forgiveness on behalf of the maid, but I still hope you can understand the maid. After Lucian left, The girl sat on the bed, repeatedly pondering what Lucian had said. Despite witnessing the maid's willfulness, they still apologized to someone as insignificant as her for the maid's sake. Elbiri was so worried about her, yet said nothing when facing the maid. The girl deeply felt how beloved the fake maid was. She once fantasized about such a scenario, but now that longing had long become a thing of the past. Even if those who hurt her showed no remorse, it wouldn't cause any ripples in her heart. Right now, the girl didn't want personal revenge. She was simply completing her mission. After all, the magical beast byproduct used by the maid could only be made using human corpses. The kind and innocent XCI made in people's eyes, behind their backs, was using magical beast ointment made from corpses. And the fake maid not only had eyes similar to bronze, but besides the ointment, might have used countless magical beast byproducts. For this reason, the girl had to quickly investigate the forces behind the fake made to prevent them from causing greater harm. She took out a dagger, cut her finger, and then dripped the blood onto the mud doll. The girl's blood had the ability to neutralize magical beast byproducts. Lucian said the fake maid would use the ointment once a month. At that time, Pandelian and her fiancé, Grey Eagle, would come to the Duke's mansion. As long as the mud doll mixed the blood into the ointment, then the fake maid would reveal her true face in front of everyone. Time quickly passed, a month went by. The maids all became busy due to the maid's marriage ceremony. The entire mansion was filled with a festive atmosphere. But Braun felt sick about this atmosphere. During this month, the maid beat Braun to a pulp every day. Even the maid Yuri's thought the maid was going too far. She was a magician from the Western Empire, so she didn't revere the maid like the people of the Eastern Empire. The maid ordered her to secretly come and heal Braun this month. If it wasn't for the money, Yuri's would have quit long ago. To avoid any mishaps in the mission, Braun pretended to be fine and even made excuses for the fake maid's violence. This greatly angered Yuri's. However, Braun actually knew that Yuri's was very kind to her. He said he came to treat her because Alberi was worried, but in fact, he had disobeyed the fake maid's orders and secretly eliminated Braun's pain. The girl couldn't help but find it a bit amusing. Having finally returned to XCI, those who cared about her most were these newly met friends. Even if her older brother Lyrian saw her being beaten, he remained indifferent. Her second brother Pinox didn't even know what was happening. He only knew to envy the girl for being summoned by the maid every day. And her father Leeser locked himself in the tower all day. She couldn't even see him. But the girl quickly pulled herself together. In a few more days, her plan would begin. At night, Pandelian used teleportation magic to return to the Duke's mansion. He was already annoyed enough at being forced to negotiate with the Western Empire for that disgusting imposter. But soon enough, he would finish off the fake maid. Unexpectedly, as he turned the corner, he saw that nauseating brown hair. Pandelian instantly became furious. He grabbed the girl's wrist. "Do you even know where this is? Who allowed you to be so unrestrained?" It was only at this moment that Pandelian realized the person before him was not that fake maid. The two stood face to face, stunned for a moment. Braun awkwardly asked if he needed anything. Pandelian immediately withdrew his hand in 0.1 seconds. "I'm sorry, I mistook you for someone else." The girl had heard that he was the only person in XCI who disliked the maid, but she didn't expect him to be so aggressive at their first meeting. Noticing the girl's gaze, Pandelian ordered the girl to leave if she had nothing to do here. The girl was speechless. He had been staring at her nonstop too. Besides, she was here first. Why should she leave? Watching the girl's retreating figure, Pandelian guessed she must be the maid Leeser found to be his daughter's stand-in. Although he heard that the fake maid was torturing her every day now, it wasn't his concern. Once the fake maid was dealt with, this woman would disappear from the city. Suddenly, Pandelian noticed something. When he looked at that maid just now, he felt a familiar sense of déjà vu. Meanwhile, Braun's heart was pounding nervously. She didn't expect to encounter Pandelian at this time. Every time she saw him, the girl would inexplicably think of her childhood. Because in the past, she always felt inferior when facing Pandelian. There had always been a rumor that gem-like pupils possessed the ability to see through all truths. And since Leeser adopted Pandelian, this rumor finally resurfaced in the world. The girl, who had just escaped from the tower, was still very sensitive then. After learning this news, she often fantasized that if she also had gem-like pupils, perhaps she wouldn't have been abandoned. At that time, she was even self-destructive enough to want to dig a hole and bury herself. But now the girl didn't care much about these things anymore. However, she did admire Pandalion's achievements. In an era when sea routes were unpredictable, he crossed the mist-filled ocean. Not only that, but he also overcame public opinion in the bloodline-focused Xi Duke's family and became the Duke. Although these weren't achieved relying on those gem-like pupils, it was enough to plant fantasies in people's minds. And it was this talented Pandalnian who personally went to negotiate with the Western Empire to advance this absurd marriage. Even if people in the Eastern Empire praised the maid as kind and lovely, Pandalnian and Grey Eagle wouldn't be so naive. So the girl was convinced that the maid's marriage was just an excuse. The two of them must have reached some kind of deal in secret. At this time, due to Pandalnian's unauthorized departure, many ministers apologized to Duke Queen. Queen told them not to worry, just ensure that there would be no mistakes in the upcoming itinerary. For him, this marriage was a business deal involving huge interests. After searching through his documents, Queen took out the file about the girl from among the many materials. He never expected to reunite in this way, with her becoming a maid to Perry's lady-in-waiting. If Pandalnian meets her after returning, he would surely notice something special about her. What reaction would he have then? But in the end, these were all impromptu events that couldn't change the future. He would eventually bring everything back on track. The maid never imagined that Lyrian, who was once so close to her, would now be so unfamiliar. She was even more surprised to learn that the marriage he had been obsessing over was merely an exchange of interests between the Xi family and the Wyndham family. To find out exactly what agreement these two families had reached, the girl activated her earth magic to quietly observe Pandalnian's movements. However, she unexpectedly discovered Lyrian in Pandalnian's room. The girl guessed that perhaps their relationship wasn't as bad as outsiders said. But upon seeing Pandalnian's expression, she quickly retracted that thought. Let's skip the pleasantries. So, how long do you and that imposter plan to continue your affair? Immediately after, the earth magic connection was cut off. The girl couldn't believe she had heard the word imposter. This meant that both of them knew the current Perry maid was fake. Even though Lyrian clearly knew, why did he still treat her as a precious sister? Moreover, looking at it this way, could it be that everyone in the Xi family already knew about the maid's identity? The girl urged herself to stay calm and think carefully. First, the possibility of Pinox knowing was very low. He harbored severe guilt towards the fake maid, even becoming depressed and negative because of it. Her father Leeser probably didn't know either. Otherwise, there would be no need to deliberately threaten and kidnap her to be his daughter's maid. But if that's the case, why not tell the two of them the truth? Instead, they actively pushed forward the fake maid's marriage with Grey Eagle. Or could it be that Grey Eagle also knew Perry was an imposter? The girl never imagined the situation could be this bad. If the Wyndham family and the Xi family insisted on the marriage while knowing the truth, then the Holy Kingdom would undoubtedly suffer disaster in the future. In this case, the plan to expose the maid's identity and disrupt the marriage had already failed. However, they probably didn't know that the fake maid was also using monster byproducts. If she could expose this fact, even the Xi and Wyndham families wouldn't be able to escape responsibility. Meanwhile, Pandalnian was very dissatisfied with Lyrian's efficiency. Why hadn't he told their father and Pinox the truth yet? Lyrian explained that it was difficult for him to say it. First, Pinox definitely couldn't accept the reality. Secondly, their father could enjoy the joy of his daughter's return a bit longer. Stop talking nonsense. If you really cared about them, you'd tell them the truth sooner. Don't tell me you want to play that disgusting sibling game a bit longer. Hearing this, Lyrian showed a sinister smile. I do wish I could keep playing forever. We'll never see that dead child again anyway. At least this way, I can experience what it feels like to have her around. Pandalnian cursed silently in his heart. But thanks to Lyrian, the fake maid from the In family hadn't caused any major issues with this marriage. On the surface, this was a marriage between two young people. But in reality, it was an alliance between the Xi and Wyndham families. This method could avoid state interference and directly establish a connection with the Wyndham side. As long as they endured until everything was settled, he could make that disgusting imposter disappear completely. At the same time, the fake maid discovered that her pupils had returned to their original color, but she had just applied the ointment 2 days ago. The fake maid immediately dipped her finger in blood. Ignoring the pain, she smeared it on her eyes. She finally managed to change her pupils back to purple. The fake maid was well aware that the consequence of doing this would be difficulty controlling her emotions. She helplessly knelt on the ground, letting bloody tears slide from her eye sockets. Why did this have to happen at such a crucial moment? What did I do wrong to deserve this torture? Just then, Lyrian's voice sounded from outside the door. The fake maid quickly tidied herself up and opened the door. Then, in front of everyone, she threw herself into Lyrian's arms. But this time, Lyrian didn't say any comforting words. Feeling confused, the fake maid looked up. She met Lyrian's ice-cold gaze. The fake maid stepped back in fear. Did I do something wrong? Or is my behavior now inappropriate? Brothers should know I'm not familiar with noble etiquette. I promise I won't do this again next time. Unexpectedly, Lyrian laughed sinisterly after hearing this. The third brother said we should stop committing adultery. You know, I don't have much authority. Since it's the Duke's order, I can only obey. It was the first time the fake maid had seen Lyrian treat her like this. She began to suspect that her identity might have been exposed. Then Lyrian stepped forward and lifted her chin. What's there to cry about? The person you want to see will arrive today. After saying this, Lyrian turned and left without looking back, leaving the fake maid crying on the spot. Braun, who was nearby, was stunned by what he saw. He didn't expect Lyrian to do it so decisively in front of everyone. He had been so loving towards the fake maid just recently. At this moment, the fake maid saw Braun. Suddenly, she seemed to have found the culprit for everything. Everyone except Braun, get out. The girl immediately understood what the other party was going to do. Sure enough, the fake maid began to vent her anger on Braun. Even when the girl begged and apologized, it couldn't stop the fake maid's actions. Ever since you came to this family, everything has become a mess. Don't you know what day it is today? The girl thought to herself, what does this have to do with me? It was clearly due to the side effects of applying the ointment too frequently. Suddenly, the fake maid stopped. The girl thought she was tired from hitting. Unexpectedly, the next moment, the fake maid picked up a dagger. I just need to make you disappear. At this point, the fake maid had completely lost her mind. At the critical moment, Pandalnian arrived at the scene just in time. He roughly grabbed the fake maid's wrist and threw her harshly to the ground. Pandalnian's expression looked somewhat angry. The girl couldn't guess his purpose for coming here. Just then, Peanox followed closely behind. Why did you suddenly barge into Perry's room? Before he finished speaking, Peanox was shocked by the scene before him. Braun was kneeling on the ground, covered in injuries, and there happened to be a sharp blade next to Perry. Even Peanox immediately understood what had just happened. Braun took the opportunity to cry and act pitiful. Looks like you've already anticipated things would turn out this way. After muttering softly, Pandalnian bent down. No matter what, it's all the fault of my trashy sister. Miss Perry, I'll be responsible for you for now. Peanox was slightly stunned upon hearing this form of address. Then, Pandalnian picked up the girl in his arms. He left the scene, ignoring the gazes of many maids. After this incident, Peanox finally understood the true nature of the fake maid. However, it became difficult for him and the girl to return to their previous relationship. Pandalnian carried the girl directly to the bed. The girl thanked him for his help while wondering to herself, how did he know where her room was? Moreover, from the journey until now, Pandalnian hadn't said a word. Suddenly, a large hand reached towards the girl. She was about to be on guard when she realized he was treating her wounds. Then Pandalnian gave the girl a thorough treatment from top to bottom. I've treated all the visible wounds. Is there anywhere else that feels uncomfortable? The girl thanked him, saying she was fine now. At this moment, a commotion was heard from outside. Using earth magic to look, it turned out that Houghton and his entourage had arrived at the Duke's mansion. Pandalnian also sensed it. He looked out the window. What follows will be the crucial moment determining whether XCI and Wyndham can form an alliance. The maid's fiancé had finally arrived at the Duke's mansion, but Pandalnian didn't go to welcome him. He casually remarked, we'll see him at the dinner banquet later anyway. The girl didn't expect Pandalnian to be so lazy about basic etiquette towards Houghton. However, from the Holy Kingdom standpoint, he would be happy to see conflict between the two families. As he spoke, Pandalnian requested the girl to attend the banquet as well. Although tonight's banquet atmosphere would be relatively casual and free, it was still to welcome the Western Empire's guests. So even if the fake maid had made a mistake, she must attend. And as the maid's attendant, the girl had an obligation to accompany her. The girl was thinking about exposing the fake maid's true identity at the banquet. Unexpectedly, Pandalnian's next words startled her. You don't need to feel pressured by the maid at the banquet, because she will disappear soon. Did Pandalnian's words just now mean that once the two families officially start interacting, the maid would be useless? But why tell such important information to her? Can I ask you a question? Why are you being so nice to me? Treating my wounds is one thing, but telling me, a mere attendant, about the maid situation? Pandalnian hesitated for a moment. Because I saw your face. The girl was confused. Didn't he really dislike this face that looked like the maid's? Before he finished speaking, Pandalnian turned to leave. Don't say such strange things. Just prepare well for the dinner banquet. Pandalnian's reaction caused the girl to feel uneasy. Could it be that his jewel eyes could really see through the truth and discover her identity? The girl told herself not to overthink. After all, the chances of meeting him again were slim. Now she should focus on changing clothes for the dinner banquet. Meanwhile, the fake maid was still crying in her room. She had no idea what to do anymore. Not only had the ointment's effects weakened, but even her brothers had started to dislike her. A maid comforted the fake maid to endure for a while longer. He would be responsible for reporting the fake maid's achievements to Lord Loxer. And as long as the marriage could be arranged, Braun's life could be left entirely to the fake maid to deal with. So she should quickly go get dressed to welcome Lord Houghton. The words personally kill Braun were now deeply imprinted in the fake maid's mind. At the thought of being able to eliminate that nasty Braun girl, the fake maid's pitiful expression from earlier vanished, replaced by an almost insane smile. As the time for the dinner banquet approached, the girl was planning to expose the fake maid's identity at the event. This was the decision she made after overhearing the conversation between Lilian and Pandalnian that day. This banquet would not only have Houghton, but also key figures from various countries, making it perfect for exposing the fake maid's true nature. Just then, there was a knock at the door. It was Elbery. Judging by her expression, she must have already heard about the maid incident. After all, it had caused such a big commotion, and the Duke personally escorted her back. It was natural for news to spread quickly. What's in this box? The girl's voice woke Elbery from her thoughts. Since the dinner banquet is about to start, we as attendants must also participate. The maid said she sent an attendant to help you get ready, but I've already prepared everything for you in advance. Hearing this, the girl felt touched. She had already known through her mud doll that the maid had played a trick. The fake maid had deliberately prepared a dress for her that resembled a servant's attire. Elbery, probably feeling uneasy after seeing it, took the initiative to buy a dress for the girl with his own money. Even though he could easily be disliked by the maid he admired if he wasn't careful, he still went to such lengths for the girl. Compared to Elbery's pure intentions, the irritation caused by the fake maid's little tricks was nothing. The girl then changed into the dress Elbery had prepared. How is it, Elbery? I'm worried this dress might be a bit too short. Elbery rushed forward to hug the girl, praising her appearance as absolutely flawless. Then he rummaged through the box for makeup, intending to make Braun the most eye-catching person at the banquet. Seeing this, the girl felt a twinge of bitterness in her heart. It seemed Elbery truly liked the maid. After this banquet, she and Elbery would part ways. It was a good time to ask about this thing she was curious about, why he liked the maid so much. Unexpectedly, this question instantly changed Elbery's expression. You're even pretending to be casual about it. I'm just curious. You're so nice to me just because I look like the maid. Instead of answering, Elbery asked, in your heart, is there someone you particularly respect? Although unsure of the question's intent, the girl nodded. The first person she thought of was, of course, His Majesty Ma Mong, who saved her life. The other was her mother, Elris, who died protecting her. And Elris was also the person Elbery respected the most, although there were many unfavorable rumors about Lady Elris. As someone directly involved, Elbery knew better than anyone that there was no one more excellent in this world than Lady Elris. The girl was stunned. The already blurred figure in her memory reappeared before her eyes. Her mother died resolutely to protect her daughter. More than a decade later, the girl stood on the opposite side of the family. What the girl didn't expect was she would hear news of her mother again from someone else. The vague figure in her memory became clearer in the girl's mind. Elris was a hero to all women in the Eastern Empire. Not only did she make great contributions to the empire, but she also did a lot of charity work for commoners. But Elbiri's respect for Lady Elris wasn't just because of this. The country he was born in was destroyed in war. Afterward, that land was occupied by the empire. Under the oppression of the new lord, many people starved to death. At that time, Elbiri, who had just lost both parents, had no means of making a living. It was then that his savior appeared. Lady Elris, one of the 7 swords belonging to the royal army, illuminated his life like the sun. That day, the starving Elbiri stole a loaf of bread. As a result, he was caught on the spot by guards arranged by the lord. Just as Elbiri closed his eyes, ready to accept his fate, a sudden blade cut off the guard's arm. The guard, in pain, threw Elbiri to the ground. Then a clear voice sounded in his ear. "I see you put your hand where it doesn't belong. I'll let you off this time. Remember to thank me for the lesson." The person who said these words was Elris, one of the Empire's 7 swords. Seeing his authority questioned, the lord immediately became displeased. "How dare you cause trouble here without my permission? Have you forgotten that all authority in this territory now belongs to me?" Elris responded nonchalantly, "Of course I know about that minor detail, but all I've seen on my way here is the chaos in this territory." As she spoke, Elris drew her sword again, challenging the lord to a duel with the territory at stake. Elbiri's heart skipped a beat. No matter what, the lord was still the strongest knight in this area. He couldn't let Lady Elris risk herself because of him. Sure enough, the next moment, the lord confidently accepted the duel. It was said that Elris hadn't participated in actual combat since giving birth to her second child, and he was a knight who had achieved merits in war. It was a good opportunity to claim the title of one of the 7 swords. Elbiri closed his eyes in fear. Then he heard the lord scream of agony. Unexpectedly, Lady Elris had defeated the lord with just 1 strike. From that moment on, Elbiri developed a deep respect for Elris. Just a small fry, yet daring to speak such boastful words. The girl couldn't help but interrupt. How could the Duchess possibly say such things? Although the outcome was indeed satisfying. As Elris's daughter, she had never heard of these deeds. She had only occasionally heard that Elris was a bold person. Anyway, after that, Lady Elris became the new lord, and everyone's lives improved significantly. Not only that, Lady Elris even used her own money to buy necessities and food for Elbiri. Even his name was given by Lady Elris. It turned out that at the time, to show his gratitude, Elbiri offered the best fruit he could find among the food available. Elris ate the fruit without hesitation, finishing it completely. But later he learned that this type of fruit was usually fed to livestock. Someone of Lady Elris's status would never touch such food, but she still ate all those astringent fruits. From then on, Elbiri became his name. It was the first time the girl had heard her mother's story in such detail. Although it was somewhat different from her memories, it was enough to know that her mother was an excellent person. So Elbiri only wanted to be friends with Elris's daughter. Originally thinking that Lady Elris was noble and excellent, he had beautiful fantasies about the maid, but he didn't expect her daughter to be like this. After feeling disappointed with the maid, Elbiri happened to meet Braun, who looked very similar to the maid, so he unconsciously wanted to get close to her. Mentioning the maid, Elbiri suddenly felt guilty again. "I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable." The girl told him not to worry about it. She was glad that Elbiri was willing to talk to her at that time. As she spoke, the girl stood up to prepare for the banquet. Today, she would reveal the fake maid's identity in front of everyone, bringing her performance to a complete end. The maid's identity was finally exposed. Tonight, numerous noble guests came to the Xi Duke's mansion to attend the dinner banquet. The place was divided into several levels. The height of the levels represented social status. As maids to the lady-in-waiting, the girl and Elbiri naturally could only stay on the lowest level. At this moment, the girl heard Yuri's voice. When she turned her head, she found that Yuri's face was swollen. It turned out that Yuri's had gone to resign from the maid earlier, and then was inexplicably beaten. Yuri's didn't expect that being hit by the maid would hurt so much, but she was tired of trying to please the maid. She planned to return to the Western Empire to find other work, and suggested that if the girl and Elbiri didn't want to stay, they could go together. The girl politely declined her invitation. At this time, a commotion arose around them. Following the crowd's gaze, the girl spotted Grey Eagle and the maid on the upper level. As the protagonists of today's banquet, it was natural for Grey Eagle to be the center of attention. But judging from his experiences at the academy, Grey Eagle was actually a person of extremely poor character. Sensing the gaze, Grey Eagle looked towards the girl. The girl nervously turned her head back, but she heard Yuri's disdainful voice. Although Grey Eagle seemed flawless, if the maid married him like this, she wouldn't have a good ending. Hearing this, the girl was startled. How did Yuri's also know about Grey Eagle's dark side? Just then, an attendant called out to her. "Miss Perry, Duke Grey Eagle invites you to the top level." The girl didn't know why he called for her, but she had to seize this opportunity to go to the upper level. Seeing this, Yuri's and Elburi whispered among themselves. Why Perry? Wasn't she called Braun? Moreover, how did she know Duke Grey Eagle? The girl had no time to explain to them and went to the upper level. The atmosphere here was extremely oppressive, completely different from the lower level. But even so, Grey Eagle was still the most eye-catching. He wore a suit made of expensive silk and a pair of spotless white gloves. Coupled with his innate, intimidating presence, honestly, it was hard not to notice such a person. At this moment, Grey Eagle also saw the girl. He immediately left the maid in front of him and turned to greet the girl. "Long time no see, Perry." The girl was all too familiar with this good guy facade. At the academy, Grey Eagle used this method to control others. While responding to Grey Eagle's greeting, the girl secretly observed the maid's reaction. She didn't expect Grey Eagle to ignore the maid so openly. It seemed he also knew the maid was an imposter, otherwise he wouldn't insult her to this extent. At this moment, Grey Eagle suddenly spoke again. "It must have been hard taking care of Perry and maid all this time." The girl was stunned. Could it be that he even knew about her being abused? "You don't like being the center of attention, right? But you look so much like the maid. It must be tiring." Suddenly, everyone's attention focused on the girl. She quickly stated that looking like the maid was her honor. Looking at the maid's reaction again, the girl wondered if Grey Eagle deliberately said these things in public to upset the maid. Seeing that they had become the center of attention, Grey Eagle suggested changing locations to talk. At this moment, the fake maid finally couldn't sit still. "Wait, Grey Eagle, that child indeed looks a lot like me, but that doesn't mean she has the right to stand with you. Although she's a maid, she only does menial work." Grey Eagle was indifferent. "Is that your reason for stopping me?" Hearing this, the fake maid shouted emotionally. Not only that, she knew I admired Grey Eagle, but deliberately and cunningly concealed the fact that she was acquainted with the Duke. Before she could finish, Grey Eagle interrupted her. "You seem to have misunderstood something. From my perspective, it's not that Perry looks like you, but that you look like Perry. Moreover, this child has no sense at all. She definitely didn't notice that you like me. Unlike the maid, being with this child doesn't lower my standards at all. That being the case, I'll take my leave now." Unexpectedly, the next moment, the maid shouted at them, disregarding her image. "You two were classmates? Why are you so close? Don't you know what she did at the academy? She used violence against others at the academy and almost got expelled. Keeping such a lowly person by your side will also lower the Duke's reputation." Unexpectedly, the maid would say these things at this time. It seemed the mushroom byproduct had made her so frantic that she couldn't make judgments. Hearing this, Grey Eagle stopped. The fake maid's heart just rose with a hint of secret joy. However, Grey Eagle's next words made her feel as if she had fallen into an ice pit. "That incident happened because Perry was protecting me. I hope you won't comment on it carelessly." Saying this, Grey Eagle left the fake maid behind and strode away. They then came to a private room. The girl didn't understand why Grey Eagle deliberately lied. His near expulsion wasn't because of this incident at all. Grey Eagle just smiled without answering. Instead, he had something he wanted to ask the girl. Why did the Xi family adopt Pandalnian back then? Seeing the girl's reaction as if she knew nothing, Grey Eagle lost the desire to continue talking. Before leaving, he reminded the girl that she could ask Pandalnian. "As long as it's your question, Pandalnian will surely tell you everything in detail." The girl's mind was full of confusion. She had been curious about this before, but no matter how she investigated, she couldn't find a reason. If so, how could Grey Eagle be certain that he would tell such a secret to me, a maid? Even so, the girl took these words to heart. She was about to chase after Grey Eagle to ask what was really going on. Unexpectedly, the fake maid suddenly appeared and grabbed her wrist. "Did you sleep with Grey Eagle?" At this point, her pupils had lost focus, completely falling into madness. "Your face looks exactly like mine. Did you seduce Grey Eagle with your body?" The girl loudly clarified that she had no relationship with Grey Eagle. The purpose of doing this was to attract the attention of people around. The fake maid gripped the girl's wrist even harder in front of everyone, and this was the perfect opportunity for the girl to implement her plan. At her eyes signal, several maids gathered around. They handed over a cup, urging the maid to calm down. The moment the maid drank the water, the girl's plan had already succeeded. Those maids who just handed over the water were key members of their country's intelligence department. The water contained the girl's saliva. As long as the maid drank it, the maid, who had already half transformed into a monster due to continuous use of the magical byproduct, would reveal her true form. And the spirit beast brought by the Western Empire would also attack the fake maid. Seeing the spirit beast suddenly act up, the nobles fled in all directions in fear. Peanox and his father Lace came to the upper level to maintain order, but they discovered that the spirit beast's target was actually the maid. Just as the spirit beast was about to attack the maid, the girl stepped forward, shielding the maid with her body. In an instant, the spirit beast pierced through the girl's body. This was the final step in the girl's plan. Once the maid was stained with her blood, her monster transformation would accelerate and be exposed to everyone. This way, no force could cover up the truth. Moreover, her identity as a maid would disappear, allowing the girl to return to the Holy Kingdom and continue living. Finally, the truth about XEI being deceived by the fake maid would come to light. XEI would also not be framed for colluding with a magical byproduct. But just as the girl thought her mission was successfully completed, Pandelnian showed a panicked expression for the first time due to her injury. The daughter he had raised with his wife turned into a monster before his eyes. The Blue Duke felt as if the sky had fallen. As the heir of the greatest XEI family in the Eastern Empire, Blue had always believed he had a flawless, perfect life. Until that day, 26 years ago, the moment his wife gave birth to that brown-haired baby, everything changed. This was a hair color that should never appear in the XEI family bloodline. Blue couldn't believe that the wife he deeply loved would betray him. He wanted to know why. But when Lace pointed out the child's brown hair, he didn't hear his wife's confession or apology. Alice, as if knowing nothing, continued to show off her daughter. She even actively handed the child to Lace for him to hold. Lace thought his wife didn't realize the severity of this matter. As long as this child lived, people would point fingers at his immorality. The reputation of Leylion and Peanox would also be tarnished. At that moment, Lace wanted to get rid of this child on the spot, then pursue Alice's responsibility. But doing so would make him lose his beloved wife forever. In the end, Lace chose to cover for this child. He personally acknowledged the child's identity in front of everyone. He would rather pretend not to know his wife's dark side than let his wife leave him. For this, he even pretended to love his daughter more than his two sons, so that no one would dare to mention the child's hair color. He told Alice that he would personally take care of this child, just to let his wife see the sacrifice he made in caring for the child. Seeing how he still loved another's child for the sake of his wife's reputation and dignity. However, when the little maid called him dad, Lace realized that he had unknowingly accepted her. Later, Lace took even more care of the little maid. He dealt with anyone in the mansion who made an issue of the little maid's hair color. The family seemed to become more harmonious, but cracks were gradually widening beneath the surface. Later, when the little maid reached the age to learn swordsmanship, Lace still harbored a glimmer of hope. After all, his wife Alice also had a talent for swordsmanship. Even if she couldn't match her two brothers, as long as she could show some degree of talent, he could suppress people's criticism of the little maid. But unexpectedly, let alone the XEI family's characteristic sharpness, the little maid didn't inherit even a bit of swordsmanship talent. At that moment, Lace fully realized that Perry was not his child, but he wouldn't change the fact that the maid was his daughter. Until the day he learned of his wife's death. In Lace's eyes, his wife had always been a powerful person. It was impossible for her to die so easily from an assassin's attack, so she must have died protecting Perry. Later, a man claiming to be Perry's father came and revealed that Perry was not of XEI family blood. With no other choice, Lace sent Perry to the tower. That tower was built specifically for researching monsters. It contained the Empire's most advanced magical equipment, and to attract people, it was equipped with many luxurious daily facilities. Lace told himself that even if his wife had deceived him, he had done enough by doing this much. He would find another way to bring her back home once she came of age. Although the separation during this time was painful, he firmly believed that when Perry returned, he would make up for everything. However, when Lace arrived at the tower, he realized his mistake. At this moment, the girl woke up from her coma. As soon as she got up, she heard Lace's voice. The girl immediately pretended to be shocked and asked about the maid's safety. Lace fell silent for a moment upon hearing this. The one you saved wasn't the maid, but a monster. I was blinded and mistook a monster for my own daughter. After you fainted, that monster was imprisoned by the knights. From that day until now, you've been unconscious for 10 days. Also, I don't know if you remember my promise. You were willing to give your life for loyalty, so it's my turn to repay you. What do you want? The girl's only wish was to prevent the alliance between the two empires. This was also the purpose of her infiltrating the Duke's mansion and exposing the maid's identity. But Pandalnian had clearly used this point to form the alliance. Even if the fake maid's identity was now exposed, they would surely find other ways to join forces. Thinking of this, the girl decided to take a gamble. She sincerely knelt on the bed. I hope you can stop Duke Pandalnian from continuing to collude with the Great Eagle Grand Duke and also protect our Holy Kingdom's trade autonomy. Blue laughed at this presumptuous request. A wish of this magnitude was simply absurd. But since I promised to fulfill all your requests, we'll do as you say. The girl was somewhat incredulous that he would agree to such an absurd request. Just as Blue was about to leave, he suddenly remembered something. He turned back and advised the girl to stay away from Huitain. Although he appears to be a respectful and polite man, he's not as simple as he looks. This is advice from an elder who has a daughter. Hearing the word daughter, the girl was slightly stunned. She had one last question to ask. The maid's hair color is clearly different from yours, and she's not of XCI family blood. So why do you insist on finding the maid? Maybe she's already dead. Lace was silent for several seconds. Because she's my daughter. Blood doesn't matter anymore now. Also, that child must still be alive, because I haven't seen her body yet. The girl found it somewhat laughable. He talked so nicely, yet he couldn't even recognize his own true blood. It wasn't until the second year after leaving him that the girl learned about her own background. That day, as usual, she was joking around with Mello using magic. Then she accidentally exhausted her abilities. Unexpectedly, her originally brown hair turned black in an instant. Seeing her hair color, the girl choked up a bit. She remembered her mother, who died protecting her. Once, her love for her mother was mixed with resentment. During the torturous days in the tower, she often doubted if her mother had really had an affair. The girl felt wronged. Her life had been ruined by her mother. It wasn't until the moment her black hair appeared that she realized her mother had been wrongly accused. Later, the girl also figured out the reason for her hair color change. Whenever she exhausted her power, it would turn black. And when her strength recovered, it would turn brown again. The girl wanted to ask His Majesty about the reason. In her eyes, His Majesty was omnipotent and all-knowing. But in the end, she buried the question in her stomach. She was afraid His Majesty would think she still had lingering feelings for the XEI family. Later, the girl also realized that the XEI family had nothing to do with her anymore. After all, if her father had trusted her mother from the beginning, the truth would have come out when she learned to control her power. So now she didn't need to empathize with her father. The urgent matter was to figure out who saved her and for what purpose when she was attacked by the spirit beast. She remembered that at that time, Pandalnian ran towards her. Just as the girl was pondering, Pandalnian walked into the room. The girl was startled and immediately stood up. What business did the Duke have? His face was filled with anger. Why did you protect the maid? The girl hesitated for a moment. Because protecting the maid was my job. I didn't know she was an imposter. Hearing this, Pandalnian became even angrier. Even if she was the real maid, is that a reason for you to die for her? Is it normal to rush out to die for someone who has always bullied and abused you? Before, I thought your attitude towards the maid was strange. But through that incident, I'm certain now. You're a spy for the XEI family, aren't you? Her spy identity had actually been discovered. Under Pandalnian's interrogation, the girl was flustered and didn't know how to defend herself. Seeing this situation, Pandalnian became more certain of his guess. You were sent by the Western Empire, weren't you? This completely confused the girl. How did it suddenly involve the Western Empire? It turned out that Pandalnian had seen her talking with Huitain at the banquet. The girl calmed down and stated that she really had no connection with him. She was just responding to his greeting. Looking at the girl's eyes, she didn't seem to be lying. There was also no change in pulse or body temperature. Pandalnian tentatively believed the girl's explanation, but judging from the Western Empire's graduation ceremony, he still couldn't let his guard down. If that's the case, what did you and Hui Taiyin talk about in the private box? The girl trembled. Could it be that she thought she had leaked information about the Xi family? At that time, Hui Taiyin had said that no matter what she asked, Pandalnian would answer. Now, to dispel his doubts, the girl had no choice but to tell the truth. We talked about why the Duke was adopted. Judging from his expression, this question was indeed not convenient to answer. You just asked what we talked about. I'm just telling the truth. Pandalnian sighed helplessly. There's no need to make a fuss about this small matter. I can tell you the truth. I was adopted by the Xi family because of the maid. Hearing this answer, the girl's face was full of disbelief. What did that mean? It means exactly what it sounds like. I was prepared as a pawn to let the maid inherit the Xi family. In other words, I was adopted into this family as the maid's fiancé. Suddenly, Perry's years of doubts were resolved. No wonder the Xi Duke, who valued bloodlines, would adopt Pandalnian who had no blood relation. But isn't this approach too unfair to Pandalnian? Just as the girl was worrying, Pandalnian spoke. The Duke also earnestly advised that I could live my own life. But since I entered the Xi Duke's mansion, I must make everything as I wish. So you don't need to think about comforting me, because I really don't care. Perry was convinced by Pandalnian's words. This confident attitude made him feel far behind. At the same time, he was also somewhat relieved. If Pandalnian had been devastated, he might have felt guilty. But Duke, why are you telling all this to a maid like me? Pandalnian sneered. Even if I tell you, it won't do me any harm. If the news spreads, I'll just get rid of you and then clarify the rumors. Actually, I'm not very clear about the reason either. Perhaps I want to reminisce about Perry and through you. The maid girl found it a bit strange. The Duke shouldn't have met the real maid, right? Upon learning that Pandalnian had seen her when he was young, the girl's pupils dilated in shock. She had no memory of meeting Pandalnian. Just then, an attendant burst in to report that the underground prison had collapsed and the imprisoned imposter was now missing. Hearing this, Pandalnian immediately ran out. However, the culprit who destroyed the prison now regretted it. Who could have imagined that he and Pandalnian would discuss such important matters? Meanwhile, the fake maid had just regained consciousness. After a moment of shock, she suddenly laughed. It must be people from the organization coming to rescue me. Originally, she was a bit uneasy about messing things up, but fortunately, she was different from those disposable pawns. Just then, footsteps were heard from behind. The fake maid excitedly turned to look. However, upon seeing who it was, her face was filled with terror. It was none other than the culprit who had caused her downfall, Braun. She frantically questioned what the other's true identity was. Perry coldly smiled. Then she spoke the fake maid's real name. Miss Daisy, no need to feel nervous. Now allow me to introduce myself. My real name is Perry and Xi. Seeing that colorful black hair, the fake maid felt her heart skip a beat. This maid who had always been bullied and abused by her was actually the true daughter of the Xi family. She tried to boost her confidence by shouting. The real maid had already died long ago. Moreover, she was an illegitimate child who couldn't even inherit the family bloodline. That's why I disguised myself with this brown hair. Perry couldn't be bothered to argue further. I came here hoping you could assist me. Hearing this, the fake maid told her not to even think about it. Even if it's just to confirm whether she had leaked any secrets, the organization would definitely send someone to find her. And you foolishly exposed the fact that you're the real maid. As long as I spread the news, they will certainly ensure my safety. It was just as Perry had thought. Behind the fake maid was a massive underground organization. Hearing the fake maid still talking nonsense, Perry couldn't help but laugh. She casually snapped her fingers, and a bunch of people in black fell from above. Is this the organization Miss Daisy trusts? Besides, don't you wonder why I dare to reveal the secret? This is an artificial cave 500 meters below ground. No one can save you. Since you've heard the secret, please just die. Saying this, the girl unleashed earth magic. Accompanied by a rumbling sound, the cave shook violently. Only then did the fake maid realize that this woman was the mastermind behind the prison earthquake, and she had just just missed her only chance to negotiate. Realizing this, the fake maid fainted in fear. Next, the girl only needed to move the cave, transporting it to the Holy Kingdom to complete her mission. But before that, she still had to find something on the fake maid. The legendary artifact that could change one's appearance. If the imposter escaped with the ability to change her appearance at will, since the girl could already freely change her body, this thing wasn't of much use to her. But it might be helpful for His Majesty and Mello. Just then, the light from the artifact entered the girl's body. Then the artifact cracked with a snap. The girl panicked immediately. Did she accidentally break it? She decided to just put the lid back on and pretend nothing happened. Mello would figure it out anyway. Finally, it was time for the girl to settle things with the XEI family. Ever since the fake maid's identity was exposed, Peanox had started to self-destruct again. Even Lelio, who had known all along that the maid was an imposter, had also suffered a huge psychological trauma. He even found the girl and invited her to stay here, to act as their emotional comfort. Since the imposter who imitated my sister has been arrested, we need someone to fill this position. Since you have a face identical to my sister's, stay here. Let us continue to reminisce about that deceased child. Even though Lelio had already accepted that the maid was dead, he still insisted on keeping her by his side like a doll. Perry angrily stated, "What you need is not me who looks like your sister, but a doctor who can treat your mental illness." Surprisingly, after hearing this, Lelio didn't refute a single word. Instead, he reminded the girl that Perry was a gentle child and hoped she could model her future behavior after this. Seeing him like this, it was clear he hadn't listened to the girl's words. "Then I'll be going now. I wish you good health." Leaving the room, the girl was irritated by her brother's useless behavior. Since they abandoned her, they should be living better. Now that the task assigned by His Majesty was completed, everything else about the XEI family was irrelevant to her. After all, it took her time to gradually let go of her attachment. Finally, the girl prepared to say goodbye to Albury and the others. As soon as he saw the girl, Albury became extremely excited. He looked her up and down, concerned if she was injured anywhere. Now she and Yuri's had officially submitted their resignation applications, and they received a generous severance package. With this money, she could even retire for life. At this moment, the girl had the idea of recruiting Albury. But before she could speak, Yuri's mentioned that Albury had already received an offer from the Knight's Order. The girl realized her rashness. Albury was originally an outstanding knight. If she tied Albury to a small place like the Holy Kingdom, she would feel like she was letting him down. But no matter what choice Albury made, the girl sincerely hoped he could become happy. Then Yuri's also asked about Perry's plans. Although there was no maid anymore, staying here to work was actually not bad. The girl pretended to think for a moment. Then she said she had also decided to resign. Unexpectedly, these words were overheard by Peanox, who was passing by. Thinking of his older brother Lelio, who had already become mentally disturbed to this extent, in order to keep the girl in the mansion as a substitute for their sister, he could even resort to any means necessary. Just a while ago, Peanox had heard about the girl's intention to resign. The girl wanted to explain clearly to him that no matter how much he tried to keep her, she wouldn't change her decision. But to her surprise, Peanox simply wanted to persuade her to continue working at the Duke's mansion. First, there's a big gap in living standards between the Holy Kingdom and the Empire. People in the Holy Kingdom can't succeed just by working hard now. After hearing him chatter on and on, the girl couldn't tell if he had other intentions. But regardless, she didn't want to change her decision. "Thank you for these suggestions. I'll accept your kind intentions. But more importantly, how are you feeling? Have you bounced back after the fake maid was exposed?" Of course, it's not that easy to let go. Before the truth came out, I sincerely believed that imposter was my sister. Even though she looked different from how I remembered, I just thought it was our fault that caused her to change. But just when I couldn't bear the resistance in my heart anymore, you appeared, looking very much like Perry. I don't know why, but compared to that imposter, I saw shadows of Perry's childhood in you. I've been thinking about why Miss Perry looks so much like my sister. Later I figured it out. Although I disliked how my father and older brother buried their past mistakes and wholeheartedly favored Perry, I realized I wasn't much different. The moment I saw Miss Perry, I found that I could overlap you with those happy times without any guilt. While pretending not to understand my father and brother's obsession, I also wanted to get comfort from Miss Perry. Thinking about it now, this behavior was too offensive to you. Although the girl felt it was too late for remorse now, since they had gotten along well during this time, she decided to comfort him. "Peanox, you don't need to feel sorry. Most people have such fantasies, seeking comfort from others." Perhaps the real maid had the same idea. Hearing this, Peanox finally smiled with relief. "If only you really thought that way. Miss Perry, you've had a hard time too." Just when the girl thought her connection with Peanox had come to an end, she encountered Lelio again on her way back to her room. He stared at the girl for a while, then said something that made her hair stand on end. "Are you really planning to leave us?" After Perry said this, Lelio turned and left. The girl could hardly believe that Lelio had become mentally disturbed to this extent. But at least he didn't persist further. Early the next morning, just as the girl was packing to go home, a maid hurriedly brought a newspaper, asking her to look at the headline news. The girl's home had been accidentally destroyed, and the Holy Kingdom's national bank had been frozen. There were very few people who could make both these things happen simultaneously. The girl immediately thought of Lelio. No wonder he left so abruptly yesterday. The girl angrily threw her luggage back into the room. She couldn't believe Lelio would use such despicable means to keep her. Although she didn't care much about money in the house, she couldn't let such a big loss go just like that. The girl immediately activated her earth magic to observe his whereabouts. Unexpectedly, she stumbled upon a scene of Peanox and Lelio arguing. It turned out Peanox also felt ashamed of what Lelio had done. However, Lelio still insisted on his own way. "Aren't you also relying on Miss Perry? This is beneficial for you too. Why are you so angry? Or are you now getting mad at me for the sake of an unrelated person?" Peanox felt deeply disappointed. Big Brother wasn't like this before. Why have you become like this? What exactly did you see in that tower back then? Lelio turned his head impatiently, indicating he didn't want to answer this question. Seeing this, Peanox also became angry. "Do you really plan to keep hiding this from me? I'm increasingly unsure if you even consider me family anymore." The girl found this conversation perplexing. Peanox said Lelio had seen something that made him act strangely. Thinking about this, the girl decided to ask the more approachable Peanox for clarity. As expected, he was sitting under a tree as usual. Seeing the girl, Peanox asked if she needed anything. "I heard you can't go home for now." The girl took out 2 bottles of wine and invited Peanox to have a drink with her. Seeing him so worried, Peanox felt full of remorse. Later, the girl started talking about her family in the Holy Kingdom. This topic was more likely to resonate with Peanox. "Although they're all good people, I still often imagine what it would be like if I had been born into a family like this from the start. Sometimes they hide important things from me for my sake, but what I want is for family to share their difficulties together." Peanox fell for the bait. He also felt that his brother Lelio was hiding something from him. Although he had always been good to him, he had indeed become strange. Over a decade ago, they discovered something unusual in the account of the man claiming to be Perry's biological father. Father immediately decided to investigate that tower. The leader of the investigation team at that time was his older brother Lelio. Although it was ostensibly to investigate him, in reality, Father had given him another task in secret. The so-called investigation was actually an excuse to bring Perry home. However, upon reaching the tower, what they saw were various dolls scattered around the room like corpses. Among them, they could deduce traces of Perry being abused. But Perry wasn't in the room. It was as if no one had ever lived there. The girl still didn't understand after hearing this. It would be normal to become mentally disturbed after witnessing such a scene. But this was just the story XEI made public. In fact, the truth was that Lelio went into the tower alone. The investigation team said that as soon as my brother entered, he immediately locked the door. Although he later explained that he did this to protect the scene, he firmly believed that for his calm and mature brother to change overnight, he must have seen something extremely shocking. Thinking that the source of all the girl's misfortunes was actually the Wyndham family. Not long ago, the girl learned from her conversation with Peanox that the reason for Lelio's mental disturbance was something he had seen in the tower in the past. But the girl felt this reason alone wasn't sufficient. After all, others had also entered the tower, so why were they all doing fine? Peanox hesitated for a moment. Then he revealed another unknown truth. After Lelio entered the tower alone, he stayed there for a full 3 days without coming out. It was based on this that Peanox was certain Lelio had hidden the truth from him. Just 3 days could cause him to become mentally disturbed. Peanox couldn't imagine how scared Perry must have been in such a place. Logically, he should also have the right to know what happened, but his brother insisted on excluding him like this. Those dolls were actually made by the girl when she missed her family. Later, She used them to distract herself from pain, but the girl wouldn't tell Peanox this. She chose to comfort him with gentle words. Maybe Lelio doesn't tell you about the tower to protect you, even though you're now a capable knight. In Lelio's eyes, you're still his immature little brother. He's doing this not just for Perry's maid, but also for you. Peanox had never thought of it this way. All along, he had only focused on his brother's strange behavior, assuming he must have bad intentions for keeping secrets. But if their roles were reversed, he might also try to keep his brother from worrying. Realizing this, Peanox stood up abruptly. Since there was still a chance to change things, he wanted to go talk to Lelio again. His impulsiveness made the girl a bit helpless. The best outcome would be for the brothers to reconcile, and for Peanox to convince Lelio to return to the Holy Kingdom. At this moment, Peanox returned to Lelio's office. You stormed off angrily earlier. What's the matter now? Do you remember? When Perry left, you made a decision without considering my opinion. I know there must be reasons I'm unaware of. Brother must feel even more guilty than I do. But I've grown up now, and I can support you too. No matter what happened to you or what mistakes you made, it doesn't matter. We'll bear it together from now on. So let's send Miss Perry away. You know in your heart, no one can replace Perry. Hearing this, Lelio turned his head back. Since you met that maid, you've become frivolous. I think you shouldn't meet that woman again. It might be better to send her away as you suggested. Of course, it's up to you whether to send her away or not. But don't let her appear in front of me again. And so, the girl boarded the carriage back to the Holy Kingdom. As she left, Peanox came to see her off. Although he was from the XEI family, he was still somewhat useful. The girl leaned against the carriage window, imagining the scene of returning to the Holy Kingdom and seeing her real family. But as soon as she arrived in the Holy Kingdom, Mello exploded at her. Weren't you supposed to embarrass the imposter? Who told you to put on a suicide show? The girl said completing the mission was enough. Don't meddle. By the way, where is His Majesty? Learning that His Majesty wasn't in the Holy Kingdom, Perry's excitement immediately diminished by half. She knew that to manage a declining country, His Majesty had to personally rush about every day. But she still wanted to report her work to His Majesty. From the group that recommended the fake, made Cecily to enter the Duke's mansion, to the person behind funding the group, and the superiors manipulating these people, Perry investigated step by step in this order. But she found that all the evidence pointed to Hui Tain. No wonder he knew the identity of the fake maid. Back then, Cecily's maid said she would report her achievements to Lord Loxa. This person is Hui Tain's uncle, from the Wyndham family like Hui Tain. In other words, their opinions are aligned. But we can't casually provoke such a powerful faction. It's impossible to make enemies with the most powerful family in the Western Empire, so this investigation can only be considered fruitless. However, Mello stated that he had already obtained the evidence he wanted. He is now very certain that both Perry's mother's death and the imprisonment in the tower were Lox's doing. The girl was shocked upon hearing this and hurriedly asked what evidence he had. It turns out that long ago, Mello and His Majesty had deduced clues linking the fake maid to Perry's mother's death. When the fake maid first appeared, her face was plastered all over the newspapers. But that face was too similar to Perry's. Outsiders only knew your appearance when you were 3 years old, before being expelled from the family. How could they perfectly recreate your current appearance? In other words, they weren't referencing you at 3 years old. But if they knew what you looked like at 11 when you came out of the tower, it would be enough to recreate your adult appearance. So the purpose of sending you this time was to confirm whether the other party simply looked like you or if there was another group behind them. The girl clenched her fists. On one hand, she was angry at Loxa for harming her. On the other hand, she was dissatisfied that Mello and His Majesty had kept things from her. Mello stammered, not knowing how to explain. He was just worried that if Perry knew these things, she wouldn't be able to maintain a normal attitude when meeting XEI and Wyndham. Seeing that Mello still hadn't spoken, Perry stood up to leave. After all, you're just afraid I'll waver and carry out the mission with bias, right? I don't mean to blame you. I just want to sort out my thoughts. After Perry left, Mello fell into deep regret. He knew these things couldn't be kept secret forever. When Perry first changed her hair color, confirming she was from the XEI lineage, he reported this to His Majesty. After learning this, their previous investigation finally made some progress. Everyone thought that the brown-haired man who took Perry away was her biological father. After all, everyone assumed that only a biological father would dare to do such a dangerous thing in front of Lace. But now it seems that man was a complete fraud. Their goal was to keep Perry under their control. Whether it was the assassination of the Duchess or Perry being locked in the tower and abused. Her life becoming a tragedy wasn't accidental. It was deliberately done by a large group capable of manipulating the Duke's family. Considering this, His Majesty decided to keep it secret from Perry. Afterwards, His Majesty and Mello launched a secret investigation into that group. They wanted to solve the problem in a way that would harm Perry as little as possible. But they didn't expect that Perry's infiltration of the Duke's mansion would provide their biggest clue so far. That is, Hui Tain's uncle Laksa, who is also the regent of the Western Empire. To contend with such a person, they can only gradually reduce his political influence. But even maintaining their foundation is extremely difficult for the Holy Kingdom. The only one who can contend with the Wyndham family is the Xi family from the Eastern Empire. If this could work out, Mello wouldn't mind bowing down to the Xi family. But if the truth were to be revealed, the fact that Perry is the real maid would be exposed. Mello helplessly tapped on the window. If he had power as strong as the Xi family, perhaps he wouldn't have to worry so much. Meanwhile, inside the Duke Xi's mansion, Pendelnian was working in his office. For some reason lately, he kept being inexplicably drawn to the maid's voices. Whenever he thought of that maid, he would become unlike himself, whether it was personally escorting her back to her room or revealing all his secrets to her. Suddenly, Pendelnian realized when he first met that maid, he had used honorific language with her. This had never happened when dealing with other maids. But now that she had left, there was no point in dwelling on it further. Just then, a message came through Hui Tain's communication orb. Upon learning that Hui Tain was about to go to the Holy Kingdom to propose to that maid, an unprecedented irritation and anger welled up in Pendelnian's heart. Having just learned that his mother's death was related to the Wyndham family, he couldn't believe they dared to come to the Holy Kingdom so brazenly to propose to her. At this moment, Perry, who had just learned the truth, was in turmoil. He didn't understand why His Majesty and Mello had concealed such important information. Although he knew they did it out of concern, it was the same as what he had said to Peanox. But no matter what, His Majesty and Mello were his family. Perry could only persuade himself not to overthink and focus on executing the mission. Now that he knew the Wyndham family was behind it all, the priority for the future would be to investigate them. But to investigate the Wyndham family, they needed a force that could match them to exert political pressure. Only the Xi family could do such a thing. However, that would mean he had to reveal his identity as Perry and the maid. Realizing this, Perry suddenly understood. Since Mello had known all along that the Wyndham family was involved in his mother's case, he might have reached the same conclusion. The girl immediately rushed back to Mello's room. "Are you planning to do something foolish again? You must know that using the Xi family is currently the most reasonable way to deal with the Wyndham family. So you're struggling with whether or not to tell them about my true identity, right?" After a moment of silence, Mello spoke. "Even if I desperately need Xi's help, I could never do something to expose your identity." Hearing this, Perry sighed in relief. "In my opinion, your worries are foolish. As long as it's for the Holy Kingdom, it doesn't matter how you flatter the Xi people. It's not something to be ashamed of. But if we seek help simply because we can't deal with the Wyndham family ourselves, that's different. Uncovering the truth from back then, avenging my mother, removing Laksa from society, these are all things I must do myself. If we rely on the power of the Eastern Empire, our country will never be truly independent. I've said this before. We need to use our own strength to make the Holy Kingdom great again." Perry's words stirred excitement in Mello's heart. In the past, when Perry demonstrated his abilities to him, he had said similar things. He didn't expect that since then, Perry hadn't changed at all. It seems he had worried needlessly about Perry being affected. Perry believed that the priority in investigating Laksa should be interrogating the fake maid. Mello was momentarily stunned by this. He stated that getting the person to talk wasn't as easy as imagined, and they hadn't obtained any useful information. The priority now was to continue investigating without making any rash moves. "I know you're exceptionally capable, but if they learn your true identity, it would be dangerous." Perry obediently agreed and decided to go out for a walk to pass the time. After Perry left, Mello felt a twinge of regret. He had lied to Perry again. In fact, during the interrogation of Cece, he had obtained new information. As is well known, producing monster byproducts requires countless corpses. But what Cece found strange was, most of the corpses those people brought in had appearances similar to Maid Perry Ann. Hearing this, Mello's heart sank. No wonder he couldn't find traces of large numbers of missing people anywhere. If those corpses resembled Perry, they were likely the dolls Perry made in the tower to survive. Although he was hiding it now, Perry was these people's real target. But how long could he keep this hidden? Meanwhile, Perry arrived at the Holy Kingdom's theater. He had a special affection for this theater. When he was first brought out of the tower, His Majesty had taken him to the theater, and the adults in those plays weren't as scary as he remembered. Instead, they were heroes who rescued children from danger. His Majesty also told him that protecting children was an adult's responsibility. Since then, whenever he had free time, he would come to the theater. Just then, a voice called out to him. Turning around, he found it was Grand Duke Hui Taiyin. The girl immediately became alert, wondering if the other party had discovered her identity. But to avoid arousing suspicion, she pretended to be calm and greeted Hui Taiyin. "Are you here to watch a play too? If I wanted to watch a play, I wouldn't need to come here. I came to see you." Hearing this, Perry became even more cautious. Coming to the Holy Kingdom to find her must not be a small matter. Unexpectedly, the next moment, Hui Taiyin proposed marriage to her. She had just learned about the mastermind behind her mother's death and was about to go to the theater to change her mood. The next moment, the eldest son of the family who killed her mother appeared before him. What was even more unexpected was that he proposed marriage to him. Perry was stunned for a moment after hearing this. Then he immediately started changing the subject. "Are you also here to see the play Contract Marriage? It's indeed very famous." "That's right," Hui Taiyin sighed. "If I had known you liked watching these things, I wouldn't have proposed to you." Seeing that he couldn't brush it off, Perry asked about the reason for his proposal. Then the two went to a nearby coffee shop. Perry stared at Hui Taiyin in front of him without saying a word. He wasn't sure if the other party knew something. Judging from Hui Taiyin's behavior, his identity as Axe's maid might have already been exposed. But he certainly didn't know about the Earth magic and the close relationship with the Holy Kingdom's royal family. Thinking of this, Perry's anxious heart gradually calmed down. Then Hui Taiyin also frankly stated that his proposal had nothing to do with love. It was just for the family business. Although the Wyndham family seemed harmonious on the surface, internally, factions opposing his inheritance of the title had emerged. Originally, Hui Taiyin wanted to endure until the day of succession, but seeing his confidants falling victim one by one, he couldn't ignore it. So he had to resolve the inheritance issue as soon as possible. And the biggest stumbling block in his path to inheritance was being unmarried. Coincidentally, since our reunion at the last banquet, I can't help but think of you every moment. But I keep recalling the image of you being hurt, so I want to make you happy. If I have to marry, I hope the bride can be you. Perry appeared touched on the surface, but inwardly despised Hui Taiyin's serious manner of talking nonsense. First, the faction opposing Hui Taiyin didn't even exist. Second, not being able to inherit due to being unmarried was also nonsense. The current Duke and Duchess had already been sidelined by him. What's worse, he actually said things like wanting to make you happy. He was lying from head to toe. At this moment, Hui Taiyin suddenly placed his hand on Perry's. "You mentioned contract marriage at the theater entrance just now, right? We can also be contract spouses for a few years first." Although Hui Taiyin lowered his stance considerably, Perry still had no reason to accept. He quickly withdrew his hand. "I understand you, but I still can't give you the answer you want, because you make me feel very uncomfortable." Hearing this, Hui Taiyin's face darkened. From childhood to adulthood, this was the first time he had heard such words. Just as Perry was about to stand up and leave, the coffee shop door was forcefully pushed open. The person who came in was none other than Pandelnian, the head of the Axe family. Without giving Perry a chance to react, Pandelnian quickly walked over. "Are you going to marry Hui Taiyin?" Perry wondered how he knew and instinctively glanced at Hui Taiyin. Seeing his cunning smile, Perry immediately understood. Helplessly, he had to explain to Pandelnian that Hui Taiyin did mention this, but he was just joking. "It must be a prank Hui Taiyin played to find you." Before he could finish, Hui Taiyin interrupted. "What if I wasn't joking?" As soon as he said that, Pandelnian stood in front of Perry and issued a warning. Now, because of the fake maid incident, everyone is watching Miss Perry. In this situation, if you marry Perry, I know it will cause public discussion, but I've already fallen for Perry. What can I do? I called the Duke here, hoping you wouldn't misunderstand. I'm restraining acts. In that case, do you still have a reason to object? For example, your personal feelings? Pandalnian was left speechless after hearing this. Perry, standing nearby, couldn't help but admire Hui Taiyin's eloquence. Unfortunately, he made a fatal mistake. Seeing Hui Taiyin's shameless face, determined to use him no matter what, Perry couldn't help but recall what happened at the academy. Since he was set on using him, Perry decided to play along. I understand Lord Hui Taiyin's intentions now. Let's get married. At the academy, Perry placed mud dolls around to observe people on campus to train his abilities. By chance, he discovered Hui Taiyin. His instincts told him this was a cunning person. Although he seemed perfect on the surface, excellent and kind, in his heart, he had already classified people into different levels. Those without value were at the bottom, and he seemed to take this for granted, as if it was his duty, his responsibility. Perry, an international student from a small country, was also classified as useless. The classes he attended were all replaced with low-quality problem students. Those people, hearing Perry was from the Holy Kingdom, even spread rumors without restraint that His Majesty used his body for diplomacy. Enraged, Perry swung his fist. Afterwards, the Academy began discussing Perry's expulsion. Although Perry didn't regret it, he felt wronged. His Majesty had sent him to study abroad for his sake. Yet he had let His Majesty down. At this moment, Hui Taiyin found him. That was his first encounter with Hui Taiyin. For some reason, the matter that should have resulted in expulsion was hastily concluded. Perry could never understand what this meant, but as long as he could graduate smoothly, it was enough. Now, Perry agreeing to a fake marriage was also a way to repay that favor. But if the other party tried any tricks, that would be a different matter. Then, Perry expressed that he wanted to stay and talk privately with Pandalnian. After all, they still had political positions between them. After Hui Taiyin left, Pandalnian called out to Perry, "Do you really believe you can become a duchess? I heard you and your father asked for the sovereignty of the Holy Kingdom. I thought you would at least understand how to calculate basic gains and losses. But I didn't expect you to be immersed in unrealistic fantasies, even throwing away your last lifeline." Perry felt a bit surprised at Pandalnian's concern. He promised that he wouldn't do anything to slander the Xi family. Pandalnian was somewhat displeased. "You think that's what I care about?" Perry smiled slightly. "What else could it be? I know why the Duke cares so much about me. You know why you only speak formally to me. It must be Perry Ann. The maid is still very important to you, right? She's the person you admire most in your life. That's why you unconsciously show so much respect to me, a maid who resembles her. But I also want to tell the Duke something. Just forget about the maid. Even without Perry Ann, you're already perfect enough. I hope you can live for your own happiness from now on." Perry's overstepping words made Pandalnian a bit angry. He clearly knew that he wasn't a real Perry and citizen. But just seeing Perry's face made him unable to say a word. "What right do you have to advise me? I certainly don't have the right. I just hope the Duke won't worry about me anymore." Accepting Hui Taiyin's proposal isn't just about being used by him. It wasn't until Perry said these words that Pandalnian realized. He didn't come here because he was worried about Perry being used, nor was he treating him as a substitute for Perry Ann. His purpose in coming was simply to prevent him from marrying Hui Taiyin. 3 days after Perry accepted the proposal, newspapers everywhere published news of his marriage to Hui Taiyin. The love story between the Wyndham family heir and the Xi made excited the entire continent. Moreover, things progressed very quickly. Perry will marry Hui Taiyin in 3 months. Now, they are on a cruise train, heading to the Western Empire. This is a type of airborne train that connects dozens of carriages. It was originally created as a means of transportation for the wealthy class to travel. Hui Taiyin had chartered the entire train, just to introduce his fiancée to the nobles of the Western Empire. The first stop of the train was the Wyndham family. Before them were the current Duke and Duchess of Wyndham, Perry's future in-laws. People around whispered about the attitude of the Duke and Duchess. Although just a maid, she was brought back on a cruise train after all. Perry politely introduced himself to the two. But unexpectedly, the Duchess didn't even look at him and hurriedly passed by. Viteen smiled slightly, having anticipated this. The Duke hastily greeted Perry, but didn't linger either. chasing after his wife and leaving the scene. Seeing this, people around started discussing, speculating whether the Duchess was dissatisfied with Perry's background and thus giving him a hard time. But Perry knew that this was actually due to the Duchess's depression. Duchess Seville came from a noble background, but had a very strange and sensitive personality. According to Perry's investigation, she had a severe mental illness. The cause of the problem likely stemmed from her family. Perry thought to himself that she probably wouldn't have the energy to cause him trouble. After boarding the train, Seville felt chills down her spine. Hui Taiyin had rejected so many marriage prospects, yet he brought back a child who resembled the maid, even more similar than the maid he had seen with his own eyes. 20 years ago, the Duchess of the Eastern Empire often visited the Western Empire. It was then that Hui Taiyin met the maid Perry, and that was also the only time the naturally cold Hui Taiyin showed any human warmth. Later, Hui Taiyin never mentioned his childhood again. Everyone thought he had forgotten. Seville couldn't understand. Hui Taiyin, why did he choose that child in this insincere marriage? Meanwhile, inside the Xi Duke's mansion, Lyrian was lying in bed sleeping. In his dream, he recalled the scene of Perry and asking him to read stories. He remembered Perry and loved books about monsters. Suddenly, Pandelnian burst through the door. On such an important day, you're still sleeping? Hurry up and get ready. We're about to leave. Having finally dreamed of Perry, Lyrian didn't want to wake up, but soon he would see that long-missed face. It turns out Pandelnian, after learning about Hui Taiyin's train tour, had asked Lyrian to go to the Western Empire under the pretext of monitoring the maid. No matter what, as long as he could see a face similar to Perry Ann's, he was satisfied. At this time, Perry was having afternoon tea with a group of noble ladies. Miss Perry, try this. It's a tea snack unique to the Western Empire. It tastes very good. Perry smiled in agreement. These people were just talking behind her back, and now they're trying to get close to her. Perry didn't actually care about these idle gossips, but she didn't expect them to become so brazen. I heard Miss Perry used to be a maid in the Eastern Empire. I wonder if Duke Hui Taiyin knows about this. Her tolerance only made them more blatant. Just as she was about to retaliate, a familiar voice came from behind. Duke Hui Taiyin certainly knows. Even knowing that, he still loves Perry to death. The newcomer was Yuri's, who had helped Perry at the XCI family before. Perry wondered why Yuri's was here. It turns out he had returned to the Western Empire to find work. He happened to see that someone was recruiting guards for Perry, and the person who hired Yuri's was Hui Taiyin. In an instant, Perry became cautious. On the surface, Hui Taiyin was concerned about his soon-to-be bride, but in reality, he might want to use someone close to monitor her. Not knowing if Yuri's had been bought by him, Perry decided to be wary of him in the future. As time passed, Perry received one distinguished guest after another, engaging in meaningless conversations from head to toe. Somehow, he managed to muddle through to the last stop. Today was the day the train would enter the palace, and among the people he was to meet was the one who killed his mother, who used the false identity of a father to defame his mother's reputation, and ultimately caused Perry to be exiled to the tower. The moment Perry saw that man, he finally recalled the truth of what had happened in the past. It turned out that Loxar was not only the murderer who caused his mother's death, but also the mastermind behind his exile to the tower. In fact, Perry had despised Loxar for a long time. At 17, he came to a factory in the Western Empire on a mission. As he delved deeper, he accidentally witnessed them conducting human experiments. Perry knew he couldn't stand by and do nothing, so he used magic to destroy the factory complex and escorted the person in charge back to the Holy Kingdom. Through interrogation, it was revealed that their goal was to create human weapons. But what Mello found strange was that these people's research focus wasn't on enhancing strength, but on eliminating pain sensation and self-awareness, thus creating perfect weapons unaffected by any emotions. Later, due to Loxar's intervention, Perry had to end the investigation. Thinking about it now, Hui Taiyin was likely affected by the experiments too. Perhaps someone, in order to shape a perfect monarch, had eliminated his emotions. Soon after, the train arrived at the palace. Perry not only saw Loxar, but also his brother Lyrian. Although Perry had somewhat anticipated this, he still found it surprising that the accidental killer of his mother was standing together with a man obsessed with the past. Hui Taiyin, this must be the rumored bride. Quickly introduce her to me. After all, I can be considered part of his family too. Seeing Loxar's smiling face, Perry froze for a moment. In the pitch-black cage, he had seen this smiling face more than once, as well as the scenes of them discussing how to use his intact corpse and releasing toxic smoke to kill him. Perry suddenly felt a sense of suffocation. He instinctively wanted to run away, hoping his father and brother would appear to save him. The next moment, Lyrian grabbed Perry's hand. That starry black hair was what he desperately wanted to see when trapped in the tower. But now it was too late. At this time, Yuri's was waiting for an opportunity outside the reception room. He was relieved that Loxar didn't recognize him at all. At the same time, he was also worried. If Perry married Hui Tain and subsequently became close to Loxar, how should he face it? Just then, the door to the reception room opened. Lyrian carried the unconscious Perry out of the room. When Perry woke up, he was puzzled as to why he had forgotten his memories from the tower. Those people had done such terrible things to him. Ever since they learned that Perry could make human dolls, they were constantly thinking of ways to force Perry to produce corpses to the maximum extent for their research. Now Perry finally understood the meaning of these words. Those people used his dolls to process monsters. But if it weren't for his sacrifice, tens of thousands of villagers would have been ruthlessly slaughtered as experimental materials. Thinking about this, Perry felt that his misfortune had some meaning after all. At the same time, he remembered that besides Loxar, he had seen someone else. His aura wasn't as frightening. Instead, he was radiant, as dazzling as a prince. Thinking carefully, that child looked very similar to Pandurnian. No wonder he was so certain that the maid had already died, because in that place, he had indeed died many times. Just then, Yuri's pushed open the door and entered. It turned out this was Yuri's room. He was worried that Lyrian's identity might invite unnecessary gossip, so he brought Perry to his own room. Moreover, many people already knew that Perry was a maid of the X family. Yuri's was angry that Hui Tain was standing idly by at such a time. Seeing him genuinely concerned for himself, Perry felt his earlier suspicions were somewhat unnecessary. He reassured Yuri's that he was fine. Again with this indifferent attitude. Yuri's had seen it before when he was tortured by the fake maid. In the reception room, Loxar was talking with Hui Tain. Honestly, he never expected that there would actually be someone who looked exactly like Maid Perry, and Hui Tain smiled calmly upon hearing this, because that was the real Maid Perry Anne. However, he had no intention of telling Loxar this. In his eyes, Perry had nothing, just acting on impulse, a woman who dared not admit her identity as a maid. No matter how much she intervened, she was destined to lose to Loxar. So his interaction with her was nothing more than fleeting entertainment. Hui Tain came to Perry's room. Pretending to care, he asked if she was feeling better. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you would be so tired. It's my fault for insisting on marrying you. I should have been more attentive to you." Perry saw through his hypocrisy. "I know you just need a fake marriage partner. But since you chose me, it's because you have some interest in me, right? If that's really the case, don't just say it with your mouth. Prove it to me with actions. After all, this is just mutual exploitation." There was no love between them. They were both convinced that they would be the winner in this final game. To contend with the largest noble faction in the Western Empire, Perry decided to first improve his relationship with his mother-in-law. While Seville was taking a walk in the greenhouse, Perry created the illusion of a chance encounter and greeted Seville. He believed that, by discussing medical topics with Seville, he could definitely improve their relationship. Perry used the excuse of not understanding etiquette to ask Seville for guidance. Unexpectedly, Seville saw through Perry's intentions at a glance. "If you have something to say, just say it directly." Seeing Perry hesitate, Seville's tone became increasingly impatient. "Don't make me repeat myself." Perry had no choice but to be honest. "I know you don't like me, madam, but I still hope you can judge me fairly as a person. I apologize for my rudeness." Just as Perry was about to leave, he noticed Seville's eyes became a bit melancholic, as if reminiscing about something. "I have no obligation to chat with you, but it's impolite to drive away a guest. Come have a cup of tea before you go." Although uncertain what caused Seville's change of heart, from that day on, Seville never rejected Perry again. Every week, Perry secretly adjusted Seville's diet. Gradually, Seville's depression improved. He felt that as long as Perry was around, his mood would inexplicably relax. And he did indeed feel at that time that this child was very similar to Alice. But in the current situation, he was powerless to change anything. Hui Tain returned to his room. Perry was nowhere to be seen. Since Perry's fainting incident, he had given her enough freedom. He didn't expect Perry to not even return to the room now, even though their relationship wasn't a normal romantic one. After that day, he didn't even bother to put on an act. Subsequently, Hui Tain went to discuss strategies with Loxar. A grand banquet was to be held in a week. Hui Taiyin planned to bring other women to attend this banquet. It was a gathering place for outstanding individuals from various circles. He believed that if Perry attended without a dance partner, she would surely be embarrassed. But so what? It had nothing to do with him anyway. Hearing this, Laksar smiled knowingly. It seemed Hui Taiyin didn't like that new bride. When he first saw the photo, he was indeed surprised. He even suspected it might be the child from the tower back then. But no matter how much he investigated, he couldn't find anything suspicious. In the end, he just considered it a coincidence. If she were really the maid, Hui Taiyin would have surely noticed. After all, he had already mixed the maid's doll with Hui Taiyin's physical body long ago. At that moment, another voice was heard in the room. Perry, who saw everything through the mud doll, was shocked. The princess of the Western Empire was actually imprisoned in Laksar's room. After the death of the Western Empire's emperor and empress, the noble faction led by the Wyndham family instantly defeated the imperial faction. Afterwards, Laksar gave the prince his own name. Originally, the princess should have succeeded to the throne, but Laksar argued that the ancient texts prioritized male inheritance. In the end, the young prince was supported as emperor, and the princess instantly lost her position. However, the princess's eyes showed no signs of defeat or frustration. This relieved Perry. Once, he had sneaked into the Western Empire and secretly brought food and milk to the two of them. The princess was even younger then than now, but she still persevered. The next day, Perry was with Seville as usual. Without realizing it, their interactions had become natural and harmonious. This time, Seville even agreed to go for a walk with him. Just then, a guard quietly reported the news of the emperor's arrival. Seville reminded Perry that since he couldn't greet the emperor last time due to fainting, he could take this opportunity. Perry immediately understood that Seville had called the emperor for his sake. Soon, the princess and the emperor arrived. Hearing that Perry was Hui Taiyin's wife, the princess showed strong hostility towards Perry. It seems Hui Taiyin's taste has deteriorated quite a bit. You're not a noble. Don't you know to bow first when meeting a princess? Hearing this, Perry hurriedly gave a clumsy bow. In contrast to the princess's hostility, the emperor's small eyes kept staring at Perry. Then he reached out, indicating he wanted Perry to hold him. Seeing this, Perry was also stunned. Could it be that he still remembered when Perry had comforted him to sleep back then?